Chapter 2991, 2991 Miracle. Chapter 2991, 2991 Miracle. 2991 Miracle. Ling Han had always been a daring person. Moreover, his curiosity was even stronger. Thus, he pushed his arm forward and ventured deeper into the wall of fundamental particles when he realized that it was temporarily harmless to him. He wanted to resonate with the final two types of fundamental particles. However, he was immediately hit with disappointment. The fundamental particles had already transformed into pure energy, just like the powers of dimension. It was incredibly powerful, yet it was impossible to derive its source. In other words, it was nothing but a dream if he wanted to use this type of shortcut to advance to the 7th tier. Ling Han sighed upon realizing this. However, his curiosity grew even stronger. Could he really pass through this wall of fundamental particles? If he could, then what lay behind it? Would it be more broken dimensions? Carrying with him this curiosity, he advanced, and his arm completely sank into the wall of fundamental particles. After some slight hesitation, he took a step forward, causing half his body to instantly enter the wall of fundamental particles. In the next instant, his entire body entered the wall of fundamental particles. Outside, Golden Silk Moth's mouth was agape with shock. So what if one was as powerful as a 7th tier? He was completely stupefied. How is this possible? Ling Han entered the wall of fundamental particles, and it was as if he had entered a bog. It was as if he had lost all of his power as he struggled to move forward. At the same time, he immediately realized that the dimensions inside him had all opened up, and were greedily absorbing the energy of these fundamental particles. In just an instant, he felt his power rise by a noticeable amount. What's going on? Ling Han was also stupefied. This wall of fundamental particles was a barrier for 7th tier ultimate elites, yet it was actually a feeding ground for him. However, he was quite a relaxed person, so he immediately stopped thinking about this. Why was his cultivation speed so low? It was inevitable. There were far too many dimensions inside him, so if he wanted to grow each of them into a high-level dimension, this would naturally take an astonishing amount of time. Here, however, boundless energy was coursing into him and being absorbed by the dimensions inside him. The energy from the fundamental particles transformed into the purest nutrients that continued to nurture his power of dimension. Ling Han seemingly entered a trance as he greedily absorbed the boundless energy. A year later, he suddenly came to his senses. There was still Golden Silk Moth. He wanted to stop and head out to take a look, but he immediately shook his head. So long had already passed, so Golden Silk Moth had most definitely broken free and escaped already. That being the case, what was the point of going out to check? Moreover, once he exited this state, would he be able to enter it again? Ling Han didn't dare to take this risk. So be it. As long as he continued to grow stronger, would it be hard to capture Golden Silk Moth again? Ling Han sat down and extracted the boundless energy around him to nurture his dimensions. In just 1,000,000 years, one of the dimensions transformed into a high-level dimension. In fact, even high-level dimensions could be further categorized into different levels. For example, there were some that could only host 5th-tier elites, while there were some that could host 6th-tier elites. Even though they were all high-level dimensions, there was still a noticeable difference in level between them. Limited by his current cultivation level, Ling Han could only elevate his dimensions to low-tier high-level dimensions. However, having a dimension reach the 5th tier was a completely different concept from having a dimension reach 5th tier battle prowess. Just how many heavenly venerates could a dimension hold? Take, for example, a low-level dimension like the Celestial Realm. During its peak, it had held at least 4 heavenly venerates. In other words, the Celestial Realm could rival at least 4 first-tier heavenly venerates. Meanwhile, the Foreign Realm could hold even more heavenly venerate. It could hold at least a dozen or so. In this sense, dimensions were far more powerful than heavenly venerates of the same level. Each time Ling Han transformed a dimension into a low-tier high-level dimension, he would be raising the battle prowess of at least 10 5th-tier elites. Of course, just one dimension alone wouldn't make a big difference. However, just how many dimensions existed inside Ling Han's body? There were around 10,000 right now, but there were even more in an embryonic state and still yet to be developed. Another 1 million years passed, and Ling Han cultivated a second dimension to the peak level. Time flew by, and when 100 million years passed, all of the dimensions inside Ling Han had already transformed into low-tier high-level dimensions. However, Ling Han didn't stop. Instead, he started to develop the dimensions that were still in an embryonic state. This was an opportunity that might never come again, so if he wasted it, he would definitely need epochs to raise all of these dimensions to the low-tier high-level hundreds upon thousands of epochs. A new dimension slowly grew into existence, nurtured inside one of Ling Han's cells. As boundless energy flowed into it, this dimension grew from an initial speck into a low-tier high-level dimension after 1 million years. This kind of evolutionary speed was simply miraculous. In the Genesis world, 1 million years wouldn't be anywhere near enough time to raise a low-level dimension into a high-level dimension, regardless of how quickly one could engulf energy. Ling Han was performing a miracle even though he had no idea how he was performing this miracle. Is this because of hysteria? Ling Han had no clue. Was the devouring ability that he had obtained from hysteria suddenly making itself useful here? Then had extermination also come here because of this? If this had been the case, then why wouldn't hysteria have sent his subordinates here? Wouldn't it have been able to raise a large number of elites? Oh, hang on. Hysteria was only able to create 6th-tier elites, and 6th-tier elites wouldn't be able to reach the 33rd level. Thus, what would it matter even if they could absorb this energy? Forget about it. There's no point thinking about these things. Raising my strength is the most important task. One after another, numerous dimensions blossomed and formed inside Ling Han. His cultivation barely advanced, yet his strength continued to grow in leaps and bounds. After another 510 billion years, Ling Han finally stopped engulfing the boundless energy. All of the hundreds of thousands of dimensions inside him had already transformed into low-tier high-level dimensions. If he unleashed his full strength, it would be equivalent to millions of 5th-tier elites funneling their power into him. Just how powerful would that be? If I battle against Golden Silk Moth now, I'll be able to suppress him with a single strike. If I use a wisp of power to restrict him, I guarantee that he won't be able to escape within a month, Ling Han murmured to himself in a proud voice. His battle prowess was most likely at the peak stage of the 7th tier. But it's a shame that the Genesis world only has this many dimensions. In terms of numbers, I've already reached the limit. Afterward, I'll need to focus on raising these dimensions to the high-tier high level. Ling Han thought back to the question that he had asked Zhu Heng. Heavenly venerates who advanced by nurturing dimensions inside them would be almost invincible at their cultivation level when they were at the 6th tier. This was because the dimensions inside them could also reach the high-tier high level. Thus, they would essentially be receiving help from 10 6th-tier heavenly venerates. As such, defeating ordinary 6th-tier elites would naturally be an easy task. Zhu Heng, Chu Hao, Lin Yolian, and the others had all taken this path. Moreover, there was still the 7th tier above them, and they could even have 2 dimensions inside them, both of which could be cultivated to the high-tier high level. At that time, they would receive help from 10 additional 6th-tier elites, naturally becoming even more powerful. However, nurturing high-level dimensions would be their limit. They wouldn't be able to nurture transcendent dimensions. Thus, their advantage would diminish when they advanced to the 7th tier, even though they would still enjoy a slight upper hand. In any case, 7th tier elites were indestructible and undying, so this small gap in power wouldn't have any significant impact. Chapter 2992, 2992 Mysterious Voice. Chapter 2992, 2992 Mysterious Voice. 2992 Mysterious Voice. There were hundreds of thousands of dimensions inside Ling Han's body, and they had all become high-tier high-level dimensions. If he unleashed his full strength, it would be as if hundreds of thousands of 6th-tier elites were helping him at the same time. His power would be unfathomable. Casting one's gaze over the 7th-tier elites, who could possibly rival Ling Han in terms of power? In fact, every single one of them could only eat his dust. However, Ling Han's actions also meant that he would exhaust all of his potential while he was still at the 6th tier. After advancing to the 7th tier, his power would only increase when he mastered a new type of fundamental particle. In addition, his physique would also become indestructible. It wouldn't be like now, where his power would increase by astounding amounts each time he advanced to the next tier. Of course, this was unless he raised the dimensions inside him to a higher level. The transcendent level. Not every dimension needed to reach the transcendent level, and only 3 or 4 of them reaching this level would be fine, just like the Genesis world. At that time, he would be able to channel the power of dozens or even hundreds of 7th tier elites. Fighting against others would be like picking on children. History told Ling Han that it would be impossible to cultivate transcendent dimensions inside his body. However, he had already created a miracle by cultivating hundreds of thousands of dimensions inside his body, so why couldn't he create another miracle? It's a shame that I've already reached the maximum number of dimensions inside my body. And because of the limit of my cultivation, I won't be able to cultivate these dimensions to a higher level. I can only leave it here, Ling Han murmured to himself. Hopefully I can still absorb this energy after I advance to the 6th tier. Ling Han sighed in reluctance. He completed his cultivation, and continued to move forward. Since he had already come here, he naturally wanted to see what was hidden behind the 33rd level. As he walked, he continued to calculate in his mind. Just then, he had considered strengthening his defenses. The first option would be the simplest option. He simply needed to raise his cultivation level and be tempered by one other type of fundamental particle. At that time, his physique would naturally undergo a qualitative change. The second option would be to use his power of dimension to form a shield. Of course, the first option was definitely better, since it would solve the problem at the root. His defenses would permanently improve, and there wouldn't be a need to consciously perform an action. However, the problem was that Ling Han was only at the 5th tier right now. It would be a long time before he reached the 7th tier. As such, thinking about these things was a waste of time. In other words, he could only choose the second option. He hadn't been able to do this before, because his dimensions had been too weak. They couldn't have withstood attacks at the 7th tier. Now, however, they could. With the might of hundreds of thousands of 5th tier elites combined together, he could surely rival someone at the peak stage of the 7th tier, right? Ling Han continued to ponder how he could utilize his power of dimension to form a formidable shield as he walked forward. 4 orbs of earthen yellow light materialized around him, with each of them linked to the others with a thread of golden light. They formed a triangular pyramid that shielded Ling Han inside. With such a powerful defense, even 7th tier elites will need to attack it several hundred times before they can break it, Ling Han said with a confident smile. While they were attacking him again and again, would he not be able to react? As long as he funneled his power into these orbs, their defensive capabilities would immediately reach a peak again. This could be considered as another form of invincibility. Ling Han looked around. Where's this? Contrary to his expectations, there weren't any broken dimensions. Instead, it was as if he were in the depths of the universe, where there only existed vast expanses of pitch-black, ice-cold, and empty space. There was a speck of light in the boundless distance, and it glowed with a gentle yet paramount aura. Even though they were boundlessly far apart, Ling Han could still detect this with ease. This gentle speck of light made him feel an innate sense of closeness. Ling Han couldn't help but feel surprised. Why was this speck of light making him feel like this? One had to realize that his battle prowess was already at the 7th tier, meaning that nothing in the world could manipulate his emotions. You have come, an ancient voice said in Ling Han's mind. This was a grand and majestic voice, yet it didn't carry any feeling of life or emotions. What's going on? Who's talking to me? After enduring for so long, you're here at long last, the voice said again. Who are you? Ling Han asked in a solemn voice. I'm a seed buried inside your mark of life, and I was only reactivated after returning to this place, the voice replied. This thing was inside him? Ling Han's hair stood on ends. Fuck. What did they think he was? Why did they all want to bury crap inside him? First it was hysteria, leaving a mark on his body during his previous life, and having it follow him through rebirth. And this time? What the hell was this? My body, mind, and mark of life aren't taverns. You people can't enter and exit as you please. You haven't answered my question yet, Linghan said. Who are you? What's your identity? Where are you from? The ancient voice sighed softly, saying, I'm not a specific person. I'm simply the undissipated will of a world. Fuck. What a mysterious-sounding answer. Linghan was just about to speak. Wang. Countless images suddenly flashed through his mind. He saw intense battles, he saw rivers of blood, he saw Chongyang, Shatter Mountains, and the other 7th-tier ultimate elites including Yellow Sand who had already died battling against a woman in black. Juhua, also known as Extermination. Extermination was indescribably beautiful as always, yet she was also as cold and ruthless as could be. She was battling against 6 7th-tier ultimate elites, yet she was still enjoying the upper hand. Elsewhere, there were 2 armies locking horns, and all of the soldiers were at the heavenly venerable tier. Countless elites were wounded and killed. This was a realm war, and this scene was exactly the same as their battle against Hysteria. However, Hysteria was far more hideous, and its opponents were now Lin Luo, Xin Fu, and the other new 7th-tier elites. Linghan was even more astonished. Just what in the world was going on? He was actually witnessing the realm war from the Genesis world of the last era. What did this have to do with him? Afterward, he saw something that he already knew about. Yellow Sand sacrificed himself to forcefully contain extermination. Meanwhile, Chongyang and the others detonated the Genesis world to unleash an attack that far exceeded the 7th tier. In the end, extermination was shattered into pieces. Because Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand wasn't the focus of the attack, his body hadn't been destroyed. However, his divine sense was completely obliterated. At the same time, the Genesis world also collapsed, with all of the dimensions shattering at the same time, and instantly killing countless beings. This created an unfathomable power that broke the dimensional barriers and pushed all of the dimension fragments into the void. This power increased layer by layer, and it was a magnificent power that even 7th-tier ultimate elites were far inferior to. The life power of these dimensions was also buried. Because this power was so concentrated, it gradually transformed into great herbs that were incredibly useful to heavenly venerates over time. Fragments of the dimension core also remained, and these transformed into the heavenly venerable seals. As it turned out, this was the origin of the great herbs and heavenly venerable seals in this place. Linghan also saw Chongyang and the other 7th-tier elites being struck and severely wounded by this unfathomable power of destruction, which caused them to enter a state of slumber. They only managed to recover after slumbering for a very long time. When they were buried inside the depths of the shattered dimensions, countless specks of light materialized and entered their bodies. These specks of life were most likely the marks of life of the prodigies of the Genesis world of the last era. Indeed, it was because of the marks of life that they were able to take a human form after absorbing enough energy. Hang on. Linghan suddenly faltered. What did Chongyang and the others say before? That it was them who had protected these marks of life to win a sliver of hope for the future. However, what Linghan saw was a completely different story. The 5 of them had already fallen into a deep slumber, so how could they have possibly done this? Chapter 2993 as it turns out. Chapter 2993, 2993 as it turns out. 2993 as it turns out. It was clearly another power that had forcefully funneled the marks of life into Chongyang and the others' bodies. So why did Chongyang and the other lie? What's the reason behind all this? Hang on. Why could that power remain effective during the destruction of the Genesis world? 7th tier. The 7th-tier elites were already forced into a slumber, so how could they still channel such power? Perhaps it was a power that exceeded the 7th tier? Linghan shook his head. As powerful as Hysteria was, it was still nothing more than a 7th-tier ultimate elite. It hadn't reached the so-called 8th tier. This was because only 6 fundamental powers existed in the world. Thus, the 7th tier would be the limit. Moreover, even the Genesis world had been destroyed, and this was a destructive power that could kill even 7th-tier elites. So, what being could be transcendent above this? The images suddenly vanished, and this left Ling Han scratching his head. Who had unleashed that power? Or perhaps these images had been tampered with, and they weren't actually the historical truth. Is this possible? Ling Han shook his head. He had always protected himself using the powers of dimension, and even 7th-tier elites wouldn't be able to wound him. Moreover, these images had been placed inside his mind without his knowing. In other words, it was just like the mysterious voice had said. All of these images had been inside his mind and soul the entire time. They had simply been triggered after he arrived at this place. What are you trying to tell me? Ling Han asked. The ancient voice sounded again, stuttering, ahead. Orb of light. Everything. Ling Han looked at the speck of light in the distance. This was where the ancient voice in his mind wanted him to go. All of the answers lay there. Ling Han strode forward, dashing toward the speck of light at an incredible speed. He channeled the power of dimension. Wang. Boom. With a flap, his speed increased drastically, so much so that he could even rival 7th-tier ultimate elites. However, even though the speck of light was within view, it was actually boundlessly far away. After flying for 7 days and nights, the speck of light still appeared as small as before. It didn't show any signs of becoming larger. Just how far away is it? Ling Han continued to soar forward. Another 10 days passed, and the speck of light finally started to grow. I'm getting closer. Even so, it still took Ling Han another 3 days to truly approach the orb of light. This orb of light only measured 30 meters in diameter, and placed in this humongous void, it was in fact unbelievably small. Theoretically speaking, Ling Han shouldn't have been able to see such a tiny orb of light from billions upon billions of kilometers away, regardless of whether his vision was at the 7th tier. However, the distance between them had been far greater than billions of kilometers, yet Ling Han had still managed to see the orb of light with such ease. Ling Han was astounded. What in the world was this orb of light? The Genesis world had collapsed, and all of the dimensions had been pancaked, transforming into a layered collection of dimensions. Theoretically speaking, this place should have also been layers upon layers of dimensions. Unexpectedly, however, it was a vast expanse of emptiness. Only the orb of light hovered there. Ling Han's mind was filled with suspicion. Regardless of the environment or the voice that had suddenly appeared in his mind, it was as if an incredible secret was about to be revealed. He looked at the orb of light in front of him, which would occasionally flash from time to time. It possessed an indescribable rhythm. What the heck is this? Theoretically speaking, only 7th-tier elites would be able to survive the destruction of a Genesis world. Everything else would be destroyed. Now, however, a peculiar orb of light had appeared here. What in the world was going on? According to the voice in his mind, he was meant to step forward to touch this orb of light. Ling Han couldn't help but hesitate. Were there any dangers to this? One had to realize that he wasn't a genuine 7th-tier elite, he didn't have an indestructible physique. If this orb of light suddenly unleashed an attack at the 7th tier or even higher, it was extremely likely that he would be severely wounded or even killed. Should I touch it or not? After contemplating this for a moment, Ling Han eventually decided to reach out. He was far too curious, and he wanted to know what the hell the mark inside his body was. He also wanted to learn about the power that had interfered during the destruction of the Genesis world of the last era. He reached over and placed his hand on the orb of light. Wang. Like a pebble falling into a pond, ripples traveled across the surface of the orb of light. Ling Han didn't dare to lower his guard. He fully channeled his powers of dimension, forming a formidable shield around himself. Without any warning, a packet of information suddenly burst into his mind. Boom. This was a memory that transformed into countless images. He saw the destruction of the Genesis world of the last era, he saw Chongyang and the other 7th-tier elites falling into a slumber, he saw a mysterious power extracting tens of thousands of marks of life and funneling them into the bodies of the 5 7th-tier elites, and he saw this group of dimensions starting to transform and become what it was now. Afterward, the mysterious orb of light shot a beam of light into Chongyang. In fact, the images followed this beam of light, which entered Chongyang's mind and fused together with a mark of life. Ling Han came to a sudden realization. The chosen mark of life was none other than Feng Wuding. This was the origin of the Son of Destiny. His vision exited Chongyang's mind, and what he saw was the world descending into a state of infinite stillness and silence. After countless years, the orb of light bobbled again, shooting out a second beam of light that pierced through the void and entered an all-new world. This was the celestial realm. Ling Han was stunned. The Genesis world of the last era actually made contact with the Genesis world of the current era. Gasp! Why the celestial realm again? His vision followed the beam of light, shooting through the ancient realm and entering a small world. Ling Han felt a strong sense of familiarity. This was the lower realm. His heart thumped in his chest. This was definitely no coincidence. He had been lured here, and he was now seeing the lower realm in the images. There could only be a single explanation: this was all related to him. Sure enough, the beam of light entered a woman who was just about to give birth. Right after this beam of light entered, another beam of light quickly followed after it. The mark of hysteria. The image suddenly stopped here. Meanwhile, Ling Han's mind was filled with a torrent of thoughts. As it turned out, he was not only chosen by hysteria, but also chosen by the Genesis world of the last era. More precisely, the Genesis world of the last era had noticed that he would be chosen by hysteria, so it had moved even quicker to inject something into his body. It was because of this that he had been able to break free from hysteria's control. Otherwise, regardless of what he had been like before, he would have undergone a significant change after advancing to the heavenly venerable tier. He would have viewed himself as a doppelganger of hysteria, and he would have remained absolutely unwavering and loyal to hysteria. He would have viewed death as an opportunity to return to his main body. In some sense, this would indeed have been the case. After all, the owner of the body would have already died when hysteria's will had awakened. Chosen one, you, inherited. Need to exterminate. The ancient voice was choppy as it sounded in Ling Han's mind again. However, too much information was missing, so it was incredibly difficult to make heads or tails of what it was trying to say. Chapter 2994, 2994 World's Will. Chapter 2994, 2994 World's Will. 2994 World's Will. What are you trying to say? Ling Han asked. Boom. The ancient voice didn't reply, and a mysterious power rushed into Ling Han's body instead. It started to transform him in a mystical manner that was indescribable and unfathomable. This power wasn't very strong, but it was fundamentally transcendent above Ling Han's defenses. Thus, it was able to enter his body with ease. How is this possible? Even though Ling Han hadn't obtained all 6 fundamental powers yet, and even though he hadn't obtained an invincible physique yet, the combined power of hundreds of thousands of realms was definitely more than enough to defend against 7th-tier attacks, so why was he so vulnerable at this moment? No, this couldn't be referred to as vulnerable. Instead, he was completely defenseless. This was similar to how physically powerful people couldn't necessarily defend themselves against spiritual attacks. In any case, Ling Han was completely unable to resist this power. Fuck. What the hell is this? Ling Han immediately tried to withdraw from the orb of light. However, he suddenly discovered that the orb of light had become unbelievably sticky, refusing to let him go. Boundless fundamental power flowed through the surroundings, squeezing the air and preventing him from moving. One had to realize that even 7th-tier elites were unable to overcome the thick wall of fundamental particles. Right now, Ling Han also possessed a power that could rival those at the peak stage of the 7th tier. However, the fundamental particles inside the orb of light were even more concentrated than those in the wall. Thus, it was almost impossible for him to move. Was he going to be trapped here? If he were simply trapped, that naturally wouldn't be a big deal. However, this orb of light had shot a beam of light into him before, and this caused the situation to become riddled with uncertainty. This was because hysteria had also shot a beam of light into his body, yearning to transform him into a loyal doppelganger. Now, this orb of light was shooting another beam of light into him. Could it be harboring any ill intentions? Ling Han certainly didn't want to become someone's doppelganger. He was himself, an independent person. Ling Han roared, causing his power to surge. At the same time, he channeled all of his 7th grade seals and dimensions, allowing his battle prowess to soar to the peak stage of the 7th tier. However, the concentrated fundamental particles had a vice-like grip on him, not allowing him to break free no matter what. Boom! An incredibly mighty voice sounded in his mind again. "I'm the world's will," the voice said. "There's no need to be afraid. I have no intentions of hurting you, nor am I able to hurt you." Ling Han chuckled in reply, and it was clear that he didn't believe this. This was a power that could restrict him, so just how insanely powerful was it? Moreover, his physique hadn't reached a state of invincibility yet, so how could he dare to be careless? "Just what kind of existence are you?" The voice was silent for a moment before replying, "I'm not any specific force. Instead, I'm a power of will formed from the intertwining souls of the countless beings who were killed in the place you refer to as the Genesis world of the last era. I'm a power of will that's transcendent above all matter." "So you're saying that you can represent the Genesis world of the last era?" Ling Han asked in surprise. "In some sense, yes," the voice replied. "However, the Genesis world of the last era has already collapsed, destroying all life along with it. My power is almost non-existent." "Then why is this orb of light still able to restrict me?" Ling Han asked. Being able to restrict him, this was naturally no ordinary power. Ling Han was still skeptical, and he asked, "So what do you want to tell me?" "The burst of power that flowed into you just then made some changes and allowed you to truly possess the ability to transform into a Genesis world," the voice replied. Ling Han faltered upon hearing this. There were countless dimensions inside him, and he could now rival the current Genesis world in this area. In fact, it was possible that he possessed a greater number of dimensions. This was because 10 dimensions of the Genesis world had already been engulfed, while no new dimensions had been born. Thus, he naturally possessed more dimensions inside his body. However, Ling Han was still slightly inferior to the Genesis world. Firstly, the dimensions inside him couldn't reach the transcendent level. This was something proven throughout history. Secondly, he wouldn't be able to cultivate any additional dimensions. Not only that, but if a dimension were comprehensively destroyed, with not even a trace left, then he would lose this dimension forever. He wouldn't be able to create it again. However, the Genesis world obviously wasn't like this. Instead, it was full of vitality and life, and it was able to nurture transcendent-level dimensions. Even so, the voice in his mind, the power of will of the Genesis world of the last era, was suggesting that he could remedy these two shortcomings. "That's right. Even though your strength hasn't increased by a single bit, you've been granted the ability to create countless possibilities," the voice said. "However, only a sliver of my will remains, so all I can give you is this opportunity to create possibilities." An opportunity to create possibilities. This was already enough. Ling Han was confident that he could deal with this himself. Even so, he wasn't overly delighted, and he asked in a solemn voice, "Why me? Why choose me?" During his previous life, he hadn't exactly been outstanding in any sense. Thus, why had two paramount mighty figures both chosen him? "There aren't so many whys. If I had chosen someone else, that person would have also asked me why I had chosen them," the voice replied. "If you really want a reason, then it's because I saw a flash of the future while looking down the river of time. And you're the person who can change the course of history. So it's only a possibility?" Ling Han asked. "The future isn't certain. When it comes to something that's related to a powerful being like hysteria, this is more so the case. It's naturally even more difficult to catch a glimpse of the future. You don't need to belittle yourself. The only help that I've given you is the opportunity to become boundlessly powerful. However, everything else is still up to you." Ling Han was rendered speechless. In reality, this opportunity was the biggest cheat code that he could receive. He was sure that if this great opportunity were given to Xin Chihu, Lin Yolian, or the others, they wouldn't do any worse than him. Then what about Feng Wuding? He should be the son of destiny that you chose, right? The world was collapsing at that time, while I had only just come into existence. I used a wisp of my power with great difficulty, and this allowed me to funnel the seeds of the Genesis world into the bodies of those 5 invincible beings, where they could be protected. However, I was unable to control my power properly, so a mark of worlds will accidentally landed on one of the seeds. Oh, so Feng Wuding isn't actually the son of destiny? He's actually just an accident. Ling Han wore a strange expression. Fuck. And Lin Luo and Ju Heng both had such high hopes for this person, so much so that Ling Han had been forced to show mercy time and time again. It was only because of this that Feng Wuding was still alive. Otherwise, Ling Han would have slapped him to death long ago. What son of destiny? Pei. If they wanted to know who the true son of destiny was, then that was naturally him, even though Ling Han didn't exactly fancy this identity. However, Feng Wuding had indeed obtained many benefits because of this identity. For example, he possessed 100 dimensions, and this was far more than Xin Chihu, Lin Yolian, and the other greatest prodigies of all eternity. Chapter 2995, 2995 The Eighth Power. Chapter 2995, 2995 The Eighth Power. 2995 The Eighth Power. Ling Han wasn't jealous of the fact that Feng Wuding possessed 100 dimensions. After all, the former possessed hundreds of thousands of dimensions. In comparison, 100 dimensions were no big deal. They couldn't even compare to a fraction of the number Ling Han possessed. What displeased him was the fact that Feng Wuding had naturally mastered 10 first-grade seals. Logically speaking, this should be his, right? Additionally, I have something to tell you, the will of the last era's Genesis world said. It could be called the world's will, and did not belong to any single being. Instead, it was formed from the souls of all the living beings of the Genesis world of the last era. Though in the last great battle, extermination was blasted by the power caused by the destruction of the world, and its physical body was destroyed, and only a sliver of its spirit was left, after suffering this loss, the present hysteria has become even more terrifying. Furthermore, compared to my generation, extermination only devoured 3 dimensions at that time, while hysteria has far surpassed this number now. According to my deductions, even if the Genesis world was destroyed again, it would still be impossible to kill hysteria. Instead, this would allow it to obtain the world's core. The worlds will suddenly stopped. After a pause, it continued, in short, hysteria will become stronger and stronger. You can't kill it with your own power. Ling Han's heart jolted. What the hell was the world's core? Why was this voice hesitating here? In any case, it was about to die soon, so what else was there to hide? Ling Han did not pursue the matter. If the other party had wanted to tell him, it would not have suddenly stopped. He only said, could it be that Feng Wuding and I have to join forces? You do indeed have to join forces with someone, but it is not Feng Wuding, the world's will said. Then, with whom? Ling Han pressed the matter. Extermination. Pu. Ling Han sputtered. Extermination? Have you gone stupid? The Genesis world of the last era collapsed, and the main culprit behind that was extermination. Furthermore, extermination was the predecessor of hysteria, and you wanted extermination to kill hysteria? Hehe, it would really be strange if extermination agreed. There's no need to feel that it's inconceivable, the world's will said. When I sensed the existence of a sliver of extermination's consciousness, I knew that it would make a comeback one day. Thus, I hid extermination's corpse, and used the last of my power to restore it. Moreover, I even allowed it to develop a new consciousness. 7th tier is the combination of the 6 fundamental powers and the unique power of a dimension. However, this unique power can only condense into 1, 100, 1000, or even accommodate a true dimension within itself, possessing even greater power. This can be called the 7th fundamental power. That's the case with hysteria. Every time it devours a dimension, the 7th power would become slightly stronger, far surpassing any fundamental power. Hence, it is invincible in this world, and even 7th tiers would not be able to stand against it. To suppress it, you would have to surpass it in terms of the 7th power. But you started later, and can't directly devour dimensions, either, so you can't surpass hysteria. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then nodded slowly. If he relied on himself to strengthen those dimensions in his body, how long would he have to wait? Perhaps, there really would come a day when he could turn a certain dimension in his body into a transcendent dimension, but at that time, hysteria might have long since devoured all the dimensions and conquered the entire Genesis world. Though the fundamental particles in this place had turned into a wall, abundant with energy, this was only a part of that Genesis world, a remnant. To say the least, even if all of this was handed over to Ling Han, that would only turn him into the Genesis world of the last era. But it should be known that even if the Genesis world of the last era was destroyed, it had only severely injured extermination, and could not kill it, and the present hysteria was even stronger than that. Thus, the world's will had said that he alone couldn't kill hysteria. Ling Han's expression remained unchanged, but his heart was surging with emotions. This world's will was very good at scheming. It actually hid extermination's body long ago, and spent the remaining energy to repair her, creating a new consciousness for her, and turning her into the key to overthrowing hysteria, which was actually another her. And Ling Han had also become a chess piece. Hysteria had chosen him, and the world's will had also chosen him. He did not agree with what the world said, that it really was just a coincidence. How could there be anything so coincidental in this world? However, it was clear that the other party wouldn't say this out loud. This guy had hidden a great many secrets, such as world's core and whatnot. Additionally, had extermination given birth to a new consciousness, or had it been injected with the own consciousness of the world's will that replaced it? Perhaps it could do it, or perhaps it could not. Who would know? To ask Ling Han to trust such an unfamiliar person would really be a joke. Here, Ling Han had unraveled some of the mysteries, yet gained even more unanswered questions. In fact, he even felt as if he had fallen into some kind of great conspiracy. Hence, if you want to destroy hysteria, you must obtain the 8th fundamental power, the world's will continued. The 8th fundamental power? The 7th type was still understandable. After all, it had already existed for a long time. It was just a different way of putting it, but what was the 8th type? There was such power. Then why had no one ever grasped it before, and reached an 8th tier that had never been attained before? Actually, you've already seen this kind of power, the world's will said. Yin and yang, life and death, creation and destruction, right and reverse. These are all manifestations of the 8th fundamental power, but no one can master it alone. It can only be done by two people working together. Hence, it wanted him to join forces with extermination. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then said, "Are you sure that extermination will join forces with me to fight hysteria together?" "Positive," the world's will said with absolute certainty. "All right, I don't have much time. I have to fully improve your body so that you will truly possess the ability to become the Genesis world." Boom. A mysterious power entered into Ling Han's body. This should be on the spiritual level. After all, the world's will were enough to explain everything. However, this power soon dissipated, and the light sphere also quickly extinguished. Hong, long, long, this space was collapsing with a violent bang. Only a while later, Ling Han saw the energy storm from the void sweeping towards him. He understood now. Following the dissipation of the world's will, this Genesis world of the last era had also lost its support completely. The dimensional barrier was no longer effective, so it was naturally penetrated by the energy from the void. This place would soon cease to exist, and once again return to the void. That was because this was originally the territory of the void, and it should have been impossible for such a group of dimensions to exist. Hong, long, long, the void energy storm wreaked havoc, yet Ling Han was unmoved. He spread out his defenses, his physique seemingly indestructible. He would not care about this kind of impact at all. He was observing his own body. Even though the words of the world's will were frank, without any selfish motives at all, Ling Han could not completely believe it, what more trust it. Did the other party leave any tricks in his body? He did not want it to suddenly pop out and take control of his body, replacing him. Chapter 2996, 2996 Return. Chapter 2996, 2996 Return. 2996 Return. Ling Han examined himself carefully over and over again, meticulous to the point of every cell, but finally came to a conclusion. He really did not find anything out of the ordinary. There was not the slightest change in his cultivation level and power, but he had a feeling that there was something new in his body. It was a change because there was presently a power of dimension that was forming inside one of Ling Han's cells. Though it was presently only a sliver, and was not even comparable to the power of a gushing spring tear, as long as this continued, there would eventually come a day when it would develop into a new dimension. In other words, Ling Ling had already broken through the previous barrier, and now obtained the ability to create a new dimension. Then, there was only one other ability that could not be confirmed: he could advance one, or even a few dimensions, to the level of transcendent level. However, it wasn't easy to prove it now. After all, he was limited by cultivation level. He had to reach the 7th tier before he could confirm whether he had such an ability or not. In truth, as long as the dimensions in his body could multiply endlessly, his strength would never end, and he could continue to grow. He tore open a rip in the void, and returned to the Genesis world. On this trip, he had spent a total of over 500 billion years. He was sure that everything had changed. He returned to the profound negative realm, and he very soon found the Empress and the others. Everyone was living in seclusion because they had not resolved the problem of Chongyang, Shatter Mountains, and the others yet. Seeing the sudden appearance of Ling Han, everyone was extremely pleasantly surprised. Since his departure, it had really been too many years, and there had long been rumors that Ling Han had already died in the Genesis world of the last era. Though the Empress and the others all did not believe it, too much time had passed. It was inevitable that they would still feel worried. Ling Han briefly related his experiences, but he left out the last part of his encounter with the world's will because he did not want everyone to worry unnecessarily about him. Everyone was pleased. Ling Han's strength had improved further, and he could truly match any 7th tier now. This was great news. The realm battlefield has been reopened, Karmic Life Heavenly Venerable said. Over 400 billion years ago, Hysteria had made a comeback, and launched a fierce offensive against the profound negative realm. And after swallowing the flaming frost realm, Hysteria's strength had indeed improved greatly. Though its main body was still being held back by the 7th tiers, even with the addition of Ju Heng and the other newly advanced 7th tiers, the situation was still not as good as it had been in the flaming frost realm. Hysteria was able to spare more energy to create more troops. This time, the realm battlefield had split into 2 levels. One was the battlefield of the 7th tiers, and the other was where 6th tiers, 5th tiers, and so on were all gathered. Ling Han was sure that this was a modification made by Hysteria. The fewer battlefields there were, the greater its advantage would be. It would be fine as long as all the monsters it created were at the 6th tier. In terms of numbers, it had too much of an advantage. Ling Han was curious. Just how many 6th tier monsters had Hysteria created that even 4 people with 7th tier battle prowess couldn't turn the tables around? I have to go and take a look at the realm battlefield, Ling Han said. Hysteria's advancement had to be halted because it was no longer possible for another transcendent dimension to form in the Genesis world. Once the profound negative realm fell, Hysteria would then completely conquer the Genesis world in a single sweep. Even 7th tiers would not be able to stop it in the slightest. No matter how deep the enmity was between Ling Han and Chongyang and the others, faced with the survival of the Genesis world, this was a small matter. Of course, it had been more than 500 billion years since he last left, so Ling Han couldn't possibly leave immediately. He stayed at home for 3 years, and only then did he set out. The realm battlefield had already been active for so many years, so it wouldn't hurt it to wait another 3 years for him, right? In these 3 years, Ling Han spent the majority of his time accompanying his wives and children, as well as providing some guidance on their cultivation. With Ling Duanyun running here and there, the descendants of the Ling clan that had been scattered all over the world also slowly gathered, forming another large clan, but it was very low-key. After all, Ling Han had not returned, and they had offended quite a number of 7th tier ultimate elites. Ling Han used his divine sense to sweep over every descendant, but unfortunately, Ling Duanyun was already the most outstanding. But ultimately, Ling Duanyun could only reach 9th heaven, at most, which was still far from the heavenly venerable tier. It would be difficult for another heavenly venerate to appear among his descendant. Ling Han also knew that he was asking too much. Just look at his children and grandchildren. Just how many heavenly venerates had emerged from them. Finally, Ling Han brought Ling Feifen with him to the realm battlefield. There couldn't be too many people, because while there was no problem for Ling Han to protect himself now, he wouldn't be able to protect many people in a battle between 7th tiers, either. This applied to Shatter Mountains and the others as well. If they fought with Ling Han, they definitely wouldn't have the spare energy to take care of the people around them. The problem was that these 5 people came from the Genesis world of the last era. Aside from Feng Wuding, who they were concerned about, was there anyone else they had to take care of? Hence, this was unequal. They could be very willful and fight as they willed, without any reservations at all. Ling Feifen was currently in the 2nd tier, and was in the process of breaking through to the 3rd tier. Taking him to the realm battlefield to experience life and death battle would be of great help to his breakthrough. A question arose in Ling Han's mind when he recalled the words that Chong Yang and the others had said before. Why had they lied about the Mark of Life? They had said that they had gathered it in advance, and not that the world's will had stuffed it into their hands. To claim credit? Impossible. Did a 7th tier need such empty fame? Then, there was only one possibility left: they wanted to conceal the existence of the world's will. The question was, why? Ling Han had come into contact with the world's will before, and saw the scene of the 5 ultimate elites slumbering. He didn't think that it was any kind of secret worth keeping. Could it be that these 5 people knew something that he did not know? Ling Han thought for a long time, but if this was really a secret, it was obviously impossible for him to see through it. Furthermore, it had to be world-shaking. Otherwise, why would the 5 of them have kept it hidden? To make even a 7th tier ultimate elite keep his mouth shut about it, it had to be an incredibly important matter. Led by Ling Han, grandfather and grandson soon arrived at the realm battlefield. Similar to the Flaming Frost realm, a great wall was built here to counter Hysteria's advantage in numbers. Ling Han stood in the skies, his eyes gazing into the distance. He could see Hysteria's army camped 5,000 kilometers outside the city, densely packed together. This scale was really astonishing. Who goes there? A figure streaked over, exuding a massive, majestic aura. Ling Han's eyes swept over, and his eyes involuntarily narrowed slightly, revealing a hint of killing intent. It was Xin Chihu. Ian, it's you? It was naturally impossible for Xin Chihu not to recognize Ling Han. He also raised his gaze. Your life is really tough. You actually didn't die in the Genesis world of the last era. Chapter 2997, 2997 One Punch. Chapter 2997, 2997 One Punch. 2997 One Punch. Ling Han had died in the Genesis world of the last era. This was the news released by Golden Silk Moth. He had personally witnessed Ling Han entering into the particle wall, and then never coming back out again. When this news spread out, the majority of heavenly venerates wouldn't believe it, because Ling Han possessed the power of the 7th tier. 7th tiers were undying and indestructible, so how could he possibly die in the Genesis world of the last era? But afterwards, Chong Yang, Shatter Mountains, and the others all expressed that possessing 7th tier battle prowess and being an actual 7th tier were 2 completely different matters. Only actual 7th tiers were truly indestructible. Different from them, no matter how strong 6th tiers or 5th tiers were, there was still a possibility that they would die. After the explanation was affirmed by 5 7th tier ultimate elites, and added with the fact that there had been no news of Ling Han for hundreds of billions of years, people gradually began to believe it. Right now, the majority of heavenly venerates thought that Ling Han had died. Xin Chihu was naturally one of the very rare few who were certain that Ling Han had not died. Thus, he was not the slightest bit surprised to see Ling Han standing alive in front of him. Otherwise, if it was another person, they might think that they had seen a ghost. Ling Han said calmly, "Don't worry, even if the grass on your grave is green and flourishing, nothing will happen to me. You really have not changed in the slightest, still with as venomous a tongue as ever." Xin Chihu shook his head. "Hehe, my fists are tougher." Ling Han charged out, brandishing his fists in a punch. What was there to be reserved about? Shin Chihu hurriedly parried. Peng, the two of them exchanged blows once, and Shin Chihu's whole person was sent flying. The aftermath reverberated, and the space in all directions collapsed in patches, drawing the extremely terrifying energy storm from within the void. The battle prowess of the 7th tier was too strong. If they went all out, even the transcendent dimension would one day be shattered. Shin Chihu barely managed to stop in his tracks, and couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood, his face filled with shock. More than 500 billion years had passed. Though he had not advanced to the 7th tier, he had still reached peak stage 6th tier, and his power was at late stage 7th tier, just a little bit away from the peak stage. There was nothing he could do about this. The higher one's cultivation level, the more difficult it would be to battle above one's cultivation level. It was already very impressive that he could practically battle while surpassing a whole cultivation level. However, Ling Han was truly freakish. He was clearly only a 5th tier, yet possessed the battle prowess of a peak stage 7th tier. He was inconceivably strong. Ling Han released a battle cry, and was just about to charge forwards to continue the battle when he saw another 3 figures appear. Lin Yolian, Wu Haoyang, Bai Mifen had actually advanced to the 6th tier as well, surpassing Ling Han in terms of cultivation level. This was normal. Previously, Zhu Heng had already said that they would put all their effort into nurturing Bai Mifen. It was not the slightest bit strange for him to have become a 6th tier now. With the full efforts of 7th tiers to nurture him, how could his advancement not be fast? Of course, if Bai Mifen wasn't a supreme prodigy himself, it would be useless no matter how much they supported him. Ling Han, Lin Yolian and Wu Haoyang both called out. Bai Mifen, on the other hand, was much more enthusiastic. He rushed over and gave Ling Han a bear hug. "I knew you wouldn't die so easily," he said with a loud laugh. Now that the 3 of them had appeared, and with Bai Mifen hugging him like this, Ling Han naturally couldn't make another move. He smiled, nodded, and then said to Bai Mifen, "You've already advanced to the 6th tier, so should I call you senior?" Bai Mifen deliberately tidied his clothes, then nodded at Ling Han, and said, "You can come and pay your respects." "Get lost." Ling Han shot out a kick with a smile, and Bai Mifen dodged nimbly to the side. "Brother Ling, are you here to help?" Lin Yolian asked. Ling Han nodded. "How's the situation now?" "It's not optimistic." Bai Mifen shook his head. "In the beginning, with the addition of us people with 7th tier battle prowess, Hysteria's army was naturally easily blocked. However, Hysteria soon created a new type of monster. It's extremely few in numbers, but it can self-destruct, and its might is comparable to a full power attack of a peak stage 7th tier. If we don't dodge in advance, we'll definitely be severely injured by the explosion. We'll need to recuperate for hundreds of millions of years." Lin Yolian also said, "This should be an ability that Hysteria obtained after swallowing the Flaming Frost Realm. Otherwise, if it had used it against the Flaming Frost Realm, we would have been defeated already." Ling Han nodded in understanding. Hysteria definitely didn't have any intention of posturing or concealing its power. In order to achieve its goal, Hysteria would disregard all scruples, resorting to simple, violent, and direct means. "With Brother Ling's help, the strength on our side will be increased greatly," Wu Haoyang said. Only Shin Chihu did not speak. He had been punched by Ling Han. Though he had only spat out a little blood, his confidence had been severely wounded. Previously, he had always been able to suppress Ling Han. Finally, on this day, the tables had been turned. As proud as he was, he naturally could not accept this immediately. They arrived at the base camp. Lin Yolian, Wu Haoyang, and Shin Chihu soon left. Bai Mifen sat for a while longer, but he still had to focus on cultivating. On the other side, on the battlefield, the 7th tiers were struggling to hold on. If they were all suppressed, and Hysteria's main body showed its might, who would be able to stop it? Thus, more 7th tiers were needed to join the main battlefield. It would not do if they only had 7th tier battle prowess and were not actual 7th tiers, as they would soon die. Ling Han shook his hand and released Ling Feifen. Previously, when the battle of 7th tiers broke out, a single shockwave would be enough to kill him. Ling Feifen didn't stay by Ling Han's side. Instead, He joined the army. When Hysteria's army attacked, he would start a bloody battle, hovering on the border between life and death. His comprehension would then be greatly improved. Ling Han was also cultivating. If news spread out that he had come to the realm battlefield, would Chongyang, shatter mountains, and the others charge over at all costs? It was possible. However, Ling Han didn't care. His current power had already reached the peak stage of the 7th tier, and the defense created by the powers of dimension was no weaker than the physique of a 7th tier. Against these veteran 7th tiers, he no longer had any disadvantage. If they wanted a battle, so be it. What did he have to fear? He was deducing the heavenly venerable seals, and he was also cultivating at the same time. He was multitasking without the slightest difficulty. The Hysteria army was very patient, and continuously accumulated power. They did not immediately attack. This had to be because of the existence of intelligent monsters. In this way, if they launched an attack, it would definitely be earth-shattering. Time passed quickly, and 3 months passed quietly. Ling Han was in the midst of cultivating when he sensed that the aura of Ling Feifen was approaching. He was a little curious. This grandson had already said that he would definitely not depend on him, so why had he come back just like that? Ling Han's expression darkened. He discovered that Ling Feifen's breathing was slightly uneven. For heavenly venerates, this was inconceivable. Right at this moment, the door was pushed open, and Ling Feifen walked in. Ling Feifen's body was covered with wounds and bloodstains, and he looked extremely miserable. Ling Han's index finger involuntarily moved, and killing intent rose up in him. This was his only grandson. Who did it? Ling Han asked. Ling Feifen wiped the blood from the corners of his lips, saying, "Old man, I didn't embarrass you. There were more than 20 of them, and they were all 2nd tiers. They attacked me together, and I defeated 6 of them. Why did you get into a fight?" Ling Han asked. It's still because of you, old man," Ling Feifen replied, slightly depressed. Chapter 2998, 2998 Kill. Chapter 2998, 2998 Kill. 2998 Kill. Me? Ling Han was slightly surprised. Why? That's because I don't know that group of people at all. I only accidentally revealed that my surname is Ling, and I'm your grandson. In the end, they dissed me indiscriminately and started fighting with me, Ling Feifen said. He appeared extremely curious, and he asked, "Old man, just how many enemies did you make in the past?" This question. It seemed like Ling Han would have to ponder for a while before he could answer. Ling Han stroked his chin, thought seriously for a while, and said, "I have killed the majority of those who have made an enemy of me, so there would not be any traces left behind." Alright, this answer was also quite domineering. Those people didn't reveal their own identities? Ling Han asked. No, Ling Feifen replied. He then added, "I was too busy fighting, so I didn't think to ask them." This battle was quite confusing. However, he really showed the bearing of the Ling clan. If you want to fight, I will oblige, and I will not cower in the slightest is how it went. Ling Han asked, "Why have you come here then?" "Calling for reinforcements. I want to heal my injuries here, it's safer." Ling Feifen was quite strong-willed. Ling Han nodded. "If you encounter someone that you are no match for, don't force yourself. You can come to me." "Sure," Ling Feifen replied. He then sat down in a cross-legged position and started to heal his wounds. He looked extremely miserable, but in truth, those were only superficial injuries, and would recover in a few days. He then went out again. In that previous battle, he thought that he had suffered some loss, so he naturally had to get his revenge. The people of the Ling clan were not the type to keep quiet after suffering a loss. Ling Han ignored the matter. As long as Ling Feifen didn't encounter any life-threatening dangers, he wouldn't interfere. Several days passed in this manner, and Ling Feifen came back with injuries again. However, there was a smug smile on his face. It was clear that he had made that group suffer even more serious injuries. Another few days later, the situation was different. Ling Feifen returned, but the moment he came in, he collapsed onto the ground, completely passing out. A second-tier heavenly venerate would actually lose consciousness? Just how severely had he been wounded? Ling Han couldn't help but reveal a hint of anger. If Ling Feifen had been fighting with Hysteria's army, Ling Han would only feel heartache and not anger even if his arms and legs were broken. However, here with his comrades, his grandson had been beaten to such a state. This naturally enraged him immensely. It was hard to imagine what kind of tough battle Ling Feifen had gone through. He had actually fought to the point of exhaustion. Ling Han had not even stood up when he discovered a group of people walking over. Their target was his stone house. Ling Han had been cultivating in seclusion all these days, and no one here had ever seen him before. Thus, these people definitely weren't here to look for him, but rather for Ling Feifen. It was probably because they had seen Ling Feifen enter this place. Ling Feifen, get out here, someone called out a challenge from outside. Ling Han frowned. After so many years, how had the realm battlefield become so chaotic? In the past, military discipline was strict, and private battles were prohibited. Those who disobeyed would be severely punished, but what was going on now? They actually dared to publicly charge to his doorstep. Coward, weren't you very arrogant just now? Why are you afraid now? If you're scared, then get out here and kowtow 3 times. Then, say those surnamed Ling are all bastards 100 times. How could 100 times be enough? No matter what, it has to be 1,000 times, right? Ha 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 ha. Those people outside all broke out in a loud laughter, extremely arrogant. Ling Han simply used his divine sense to scan the surroundings, and discovered that among these 24 people, only one was a first tier, 22 were second tiers, and 1 was a third tier. No wonder Ling Feifen had been completely exhausted from the battle. He wasn't as freakish as Ling Han, so how could it not be like a cat toying with a mouse, resulting in him becoming completely exhausted? Ling Han's expression was very ugly. He wanted to destroy Hysteria, but did not have the noble aspiration to protect all life in the world. Even if he did, that could only be ranked second on his list of priorities. What he truly wanted to protect was his family and friends. Now that his grandson had been beaten so terribly, how could he still bear with it? So what if he killed these bastards? With his current level, what did he have to be afraid of? Worse come to worst, even if he didn't have the battle prowess of a 7th tier, hadn't he also dared to become hostile with a 7th tier and flip the table on them? He stood up, opened the door, and slowly walked out. Yi, who is this person? TSK, he looks like he has a card up his sleeve. Just the look of him is so detestable. Who does he think he is? Those people outside all spoke one after another. With Ling Han's present height, his aura was withdrawn. If he did not take the initiative to unleash his might, aside from another 7th tier, who would be able to tell that he was extraordinary? Ling Han's eyes swept over them. He felt a sense of familiarity from these heavenly venerates. He thought for a moment, and came to a sudden realization. These people were the marks of life that had been extracted from the bodies of Chongyang, Shatter Mountains, and the others. They were the seeds that had been preserved from the Genesis world of the last era. Compared to how outstanding Feng Wuding was, the others naturally weren't talented enough. More than 500 billion years had already passed, and they were only barely able to advance to the 1st tier, 2nd tier, or 3rd tier. However, Feng Wuding had been fully nurtured by Chongyang and the others, so his rate of advancement was naturally very fast. Furthermore, he had indeed received some benefits from the Genesis world of the last era, which definitely far surpassed his peers. You were the ones who injured my grandson, he asked calmly. That's your grandson? Those people snickered. So what? We will beat even you into a grandson. All right. Ling Han nodded. These people were unreasonably starting a fight with Ling Feifen, bullying Ling Feifen with an advantage in numbers, and now they even brought out a 3rd tier, forcing Ling Feifen into such dire straits, which filled Ling Han with fury. He did not care what the reason was. Since you guys like to use violence, then he would just use violence to solve the problem. What's so all right about it? Want to be my grandson? Someone snickered. Peng, Ling Han threw a punch, and this person was turned into a mist of blood. 2nd tier. He was nothing but trash. Instantly, the area fell silent, becoming deathly silent. A second tier actually died just like that. Though they had forced Ling Feifen to the point of exhaustion, they still didn't dare to kill him. After all, this was the realm battlefield, so they needed everyone to unite and face the enemy together. Killing their own people. No one could afford to bear such a terrible reputation. But when Ling Han moved, he was clean, swift, and without the slightest hesitation. He had killed the opponent with a single punch, as if that was not a second tier, but rather an insignificant piece of trash. Hiss, this was too brazen, wasn't it? Moreover, he had killed a second tier with a single punch. What kind of concept was that? He had to possess third-tier strength, at least. Everyone was naturally terrified, fearing that Ling Han would kill again, and aside from the third-tier heavenly venerate among them, who could match him? What is it? Why is there no noise now? Ling Han asked calmly. Why you are really too bold, to actually dare commit murder in the base camp. Who exactly are you? They mustered up the courage to ask this question because that third tier was already standing in front of them, which gave them courage. Chapter 2999 Wronged. Chapter 2999, 2999 Wronged. 2999 Wronged. Ling Han stood with his hands clasped behind his back, carrying a faint smile, and said, "You people have all offended me, yet you don't even know who I am. Stop acting and tell us who you are," someone shouted harshly. In any case, there was a third tier in front of him, so he dared to do this. Ling Han looked towards him, and casually raised his hand, then pressed down. Peng, that person turned into a mist of blood. Calm and composed, there was not the slightest bit of anger. In fact, there was not the slightest bit of damage to the walls of the houses around him, but a second tier had practically died without emitting even a sound. What kind of great power was this, and what kind of precise control over power was this? Everyone was trembling. Though there was a third tier in front of them, from the look of things now, he might as well be completely just for show. However, this person was far too audacious. He had publicly killed someone in their base. No matter who he was definitely going to die. That third tier regained his courage, and asked Ling Han, daring to commit murder, yet do you not dare to say who you are? However, only he himself knew just how anxious his heart was. His mind was completely ill at ease and unsettled. Ling Han glanced at the third tier heavenly venerate. This was naturally the main culprit who had forced Ling Feifen into such a sorry state. However, after a glance, he didn't pay any more attention to him. Instead, he asked, "You're all Feng Wuding's subordinates, right?" These were all seeds from the Genesis world of the last era, and they could not possibly have had any kind of grudge with Ling Han. Then, there was only one possibility. That was because Feng Wuding hated Ling Han, and they also hated all those who were related to Ling Han. Ling Feifen was indeed very wronged. "Since you know that we are Lord Feng's men, you still dare to commit violence," that third tier said. Though he was shouting a question, his voice was trembling, and there was nothing left of his domineering bearing. However, when they spoke of Feng Wuding, everyone straightened their backs a bit. This name seemed to possess a mysterious power, giving them confidence. Feng Wuding was the strongest prodigy of the Genesis world, the son of destiny, and when he was in the 5th tier, he already possessed the battle prowess of the 7th tier. There was no one in the world that could compare. Ling Han chuckled, and casually delivered a palm strike at that third tier. "Tell Feng Wuding to come and see me." The palm pressed down, and the third tier paled in shock. He hurriedly wanted to flee, but just as he moved, Peng, his body had already turned into a mist of blood. Seeing this scene, everyone was so shocked that their faces turned pale. As it turned out, this person's strength had surpassed the third tier. "Run!" It was unknown who was the first to exclaim this, and everyone started fleeing. He delivered 21 consecutive palm strikes, and 21 heavenly venerates were killed. Only the 1st tier heavenly venerate was still alive. That person was so scared that his legs were shaking. He could no longer manage to run, as he felt a coldness fill his whole body. How was he supposed to escape? Yet Ling Han stopped. "Aren't you going back to call Feng Wuding over?" That 1st tier came to his senses, and realized that Ling Han had actually spared him. After a moment of faltering, he hurriedly broke into a run and fled. He was filled with the wild joy of having escaped death. He ran madly, and arrived at the Feng Alliance. This was the base camp of the force that was subordinate to Feng Wuding. There were many people here, and practically all the seeds from the Genesis world of the last era were here. Because the last generation and the present generation had a generational gap, a line was naturally drawn between them. However, there would always be some who would curry favor with those in power. It was not that there were no heavenly venerates of the Genesis world here. Because they were certain that Feng Wuding was the son of destiny, they had come to curry his favor. Seeing how pale this first tier was and how he was stumbling over, a third tier couldn't help but ask smilingly, "Huang Feng, what's going on? Why are you in such a panic? Is the sky collapsing?" Huang Feng was still slightly dazed, and he mumbled, "Dead, all of them are dead." That third tier could tell something was off, and his expression immediately darkened, and shouted at Huang Feng, "What's going on?" He had imbued the might of a third tier into his shout, and this was like a direct strike. Huang Feng finally shuddered, and came back to his senses. His eyes involuntarily narrowed, and he was just about to speak. However, with a bang, his whole person turned into a shower of blood. Because they had been too close, and added with the fact that he had not had his guard up, that third tier's whole face was splattered with blood. He couldn't help but look shocked. Would a heavenly venerate explode for no reason? That was not possible. In other words, Huang Feng had been subjected to some kind of technique, and it had activated just now, leading to his death. The question was, had Huang Feng been severely injured, and only now did he succumb to his injuries, or had this trick been hidden all this while, right until it suddenly exploded just now? What's going on? More people ran over. They only saw the scene of Huang Feng's body exploding, so some people's eyes immediately turned towards that third tier. Just now, you were the closest to Huang Feng, so was it you who did it? For a third tier heavenly venerate, killing a first tier heavenly venerate was naturally as easy as a father beating his son. Why would anyone suspect this third tier? It was very simple. This third tier did not come from the Genesis world of the last era, but rather was a heavenly venerate of the present generation who had come to cozy up to their powerful leader. Thus, in the eyes of the heavenly venerates of the Genesis world from the last era, this kind of person was naturally inferior, and it would be difficult for him to win their trust. You are quite courageous, aren't you? Not only do you dare to commit a crime in the camp, you did it in the territory of the Feng Alliance at that. Yi Long, are you the one who did it? Someone immediately shouted. That third tier, Yi Long was deep in thought, and he was shocked. That was because he recalled that previously, though Huang Feng's face was pale, and he was staggering, that should be because he had suffered a massive blow to his spirit, but his body was still fine. He could still remember Huang Feng's surging life essence. In other words, someone had planted a technique in Huang Feng's body, and it had suddenly exploded, taking his life. Who had done this that even Huang Feng had not sensed it in the slightest? It was absolutely impossible for a second tier to do so, but could a third tier do so? It would be extremely difficult. He shook his head internally because he himself was a third tier. He himself thought that it was easy to kill a first tier, but to inject some kind of technique into him, and have it explode at the specified time, blasting a first tier into a shower of blood, was impossible. He nodded. It had to be a fourth tier, at least. It really was you. When everyone saw how Yi Long was nodding his head, they were instantly outraged. This guy was really bold to actually dare commit a crime here. Only then did Yi Long finally come to his senses as if he had just woken up from a dream. He had actually, in a moment of confusion, admitted to a task that was completely not his doing. This was nothing to joke about. He hurriedly waved his hand, and said, "It wasn't me. You guys have misunderstood, it wasn't me." But everyone was very xenophobic in the first place, and had never considered Yi Long as one of their own. Previously, they had personally witnessed Yi Long nodding, and now he still wanted to deny it. "Do you think we're all blind?" "Capture him," someone immediately shouted. "Capture him." Everyone moved one after another. There was naturally no need to be merciful in capturing a traitor and murderer. They all went all out, beating Yi Long harshly. Yi Long felt sullen to the point of wanting to throw up blood. Chapter 3000, 3000 attacking. Chapter 3000, 3000 attacking. 3000 attacking. Yi Long was a third tier, and most of the people here were second tiers, with a few being first tiers, so he could still hold on for the moment. But the problem here was that the other side would attack without any scruples, but he had his reservations. To say nothing of killing, he did not even dare to wound them. This naturally caused him to be extremely passive. He had powerful strength, yet could only unleash 10 to 20% of it. Before long, he was hit a few times, which caused him to stumble and bleed from the corner of his mouth. Pitifully, he still did not dare to counter with his full power, fearing that what he had been falsely accused would become true. He continuously shouted, "I didn't do it, listen to me." Unfortunately, this kind of shout was completely drowned out by the furious roars of the masses. Moreover, even if someone heard him, they would ignore him. Who would believe him? And just like this, Yi Long was continuously attacked in this way, his injuries becoming more and more serious. This kind of development was something that even the instigator, Ling Han, had not foreseen. He had only wanted Huang Feng to pass on a message so that he would die in an appropriate location. Then, he would draw out Feng Wuding. Who would have thought that Yi Long would be the one to take the blame? Yi Long's heart felt like he had suffered terrible injustice, and he felt an indescribable regret. Why had he sided with the Feng Alliance? Though there was a Son of Destiny in the Feng Alliance, as well as 5 7th-tier ultimate elites, which was overwhelmingly awesome, these people all treated him like an outsider. Their treatment of him was filled with rejection, and they did not accept him at all. He was a dignified third tier, so what need was there for him to suffer such injustice? And now, it was even worse. He was being treated like a murderer. If he really was killed, there wouldn't even be a place for him to proclaim his innocence. "Stop!" A cold shout rang out, filled with intimidating might. Instantly, half of the people stopped attacking, and the other half also slowed down their attacks. In a few breaths' time, the situation was completely under control. A person with a tall, sturdy figure walked over, every step having a majestic gait. Lord Sealed Emotion. Lord Sealed Emotion. Many people immediately paid their respects. This was a 4th-tier heavenly venerate who was extremely freakish. In fact, even Feng Wuding had praised him before. Thus, even if this person wasn't from the Genesis world of the last era, everyone still gave him a lot of face. Sealed Emotion walked over. His eyes swept over Yi Long, and he frowned slightly. When had he ever felt so aggrieved? Those that could become heavenly venerates were definitely all prodigies of each dimension. Along the way, they would definitely have a glorious history of crushing other prodigies. Thus, Yi Long was definitely feeling extremely aggrieved at this moment. How could he not feel extremely aggrieved? "What's going on?" Sealed Emotion asked solemnly. Yi Long hurriedly recounted what had happened previously, and repeatedly swore a Tao oath, saying that if he told half a lie, he would never be able to advance to the 4th tier. For heavenly venerates, there was no heavier oath than this. Thus, everyone began to hesitate. Could it be that Yi Long was telling the truth? "Go and investigate," Sealed Emotion said. This was very easy to verify. Previously, there had been a total of 24 people in Huang Feng's group. As expected, a great many people verified that Huang Feng's group of 24 had indeed gone out together. What did they go off to do? Sealed Emotion asked again. Someone had participated in the previous fight with Ling Feifen, and told them about this matter. Sealed Emotion shook his head, and said, although Ling Feifen is nothing to worry about, his grandfather, Ling Han, had many friends in the past, and there is no lack of 4th-tier elites among them. What you mean is that a 4th-tier elite has interfered? Sealed Emotion nodded. We'll know when we go and take a look. I know where he is, someone volunteered. Previously, he had followed Ling Feifen to Ling Han's place. However, these people didn't dare to violate the camp's rules too much by barging into someone else's stone house to commit a crime. Otherwise, they would have long since died. Lead the way. This time, it could be considered a public outrage. At least several hundred people moved out at the same time. Though the majority of them were second tiers, with so many people moving out at the same time, The commotion could be considered vast and mighty. Wherever they passed, other forces would be alerted. What is it? Does Feng Alliance want to start a war? How dare they? Our Bai Alliance is not much inferior. The Tiger Alliance is unafraid. It had to be admitted that out of the many forces, the Feng Alliance was the strongest in terms of power. Not only did they have an advantage in numbers, Feng Wuding, who was within their ranks, was also the son of destiny, and his battle prowess was outstanding. Furthermore, Feng Wuding still had 5 7th-tier ultimate elites behind him. What force could compare to that? The Lin clan could be considered awesome, but there were only 3 7th tiers and one person with 7th-tier battle prowess in their ranks. Now that the Feng Alliance looked like they were about to go to war, how could they not feel anxious? Thankfully, the members of the Feng Alliance did not head towards the territory of any force, and only passed them by. Instead, they arrived at an inconspicuous corner. Where were they going? Many forces were all curious, and all came over to watch the excitement. Very soon, the people from the Feng Alliance had arrived in front of Ling Han's stone house. Sealed Emotion nodded at one of them, and said, "Go and knock on the doors." "Yes, milord." That was a 2nd tier. He hurriedly obeyed respectfully, and ran over to knock on the doors. The people inside, "Listen up, come out quickly," the 2nd tier called out loudly. Ling Han planted restrictions within the stone house which cut off the transmission of noise. Then, he opened the doors and walked out. The moment he saw him, Sealed Emotion's eyes narrowed to small slits. Boom! A powerful aura rippled around him, and it was uncontrollable. Sealed Emotion had naturally heard of Ling Han's freakishness. Even a 7th-tier ultimate elite had once been captured by him and become his prisoner. Although Golden Silk Moth had managed to escape afterwards, it still couldn't conceal Ling Han's strength. Fortunately, Ling Han himself courted death by entering the forbidden land of the Genesis world from the last era. That was a place that even 7th tiers could not barge into. There had been no news from him for hundreds of billions of years, so he had to have died. Hence, though Sealed Emotion felt rueful, he was still pleased by the fact that this freak had finally disappeared. Yet now that he saw Ling Han walk out alive, how could he not be shocked to the point of panic? The 2nd tier didn't recognize Ling Han, and questioned him loudly, "Was it you who killed Huang Feng?" Ling Han nodded, and said, "That's right. I was the one who killed him." Hearing Ling Han admit it, Yi Long was filled with indignation. He hurriedly jumped out, pointed at Ling Han, and said, "You bastard, look at just how badly you have implicated me. Just look, he was still covered with blood." Ling Han was surprised. Why did this guy jump out and cry about being wronged? Even if his strength was outstanding, he could not have imagined that there would be such an unexpected twist. Ling Han ignored him and only looked towards Sealed Emotion. So many years had passed, and he had finally seen this old bastard again. Chapter 3001, 3001 Flee. Chapter 3001, 3001 Flee. 3001 Flee. In the past, Sealed Emotion Heavenly Venerable and Jowu Heavenly Venerate were high and mighty, looking down on Ling Han like they were gods. If they wanted to kill him, they could, and treated him like an ant. But now, though Sealed Emotion had already advanced to the 4th tier, and this advancement was really astonishingly fast, faced with Ling Han, so what if he was a 4th tier? How much stronger was he than an ant? That 2nd tier continued to ask, "What about the others? What did you do with them?" Ling Han smiled faintly, and said casually, "Killed them all." Killed them? All of them? Everyone was taken aback at first, but then disbelief spread across their faces. What kind of joke was this? How could over 20 heavenly venerates die so soundlessly? A great battle would definitely have broken out, which would have alerted the entire camp. Who do you think you are? An ultimate elite of the 7th tier? However, after all, it was not everyone that could not recognize Ling Han, especially those from the current generation of the Genesis world. There were really very few that could not recognize Ling Han. The supreme freak. Instantly, everyone began whispering among themselves. The majority were numb with shock. It should be known that over 500 billion years ago, Ling Han had already possessed the battle prowess of a 7th tier, So how strong would he be now? Because Ling Han was too powerful, no one actually dared to make too much noise. They were basically communicating through divine sense to avoid accidentally saying something wrong and angering this guy. Just listen to what he said. Ling Han had just admitted that he had killed a great many members of the Feng Alliance. Yi Long immediately jumped up and shouted loudly, "You madman, just see how I will suppress you." Though he was the victim of injustice, for the sake of increasing his own standing in the Feng Alliance, he naturally did not hesitate to jump out of his own volition. Moreover, Ling Han was the main culprit that had caused him to be accused wrongfully. He naturally very much wanted to give Ling Han a beating, or even kill him. Though the majority of people from this generation of the Genesis world recognized Ling Han, there were also a few exceptions, and this Yi Long belonged to that minority. Everyone watched, shaking their head. Was he seeking death? He actually dared to provoke that bringer of calamity. Ling Han smiled faintly. "You want to suppress me? Humph, are you afraid now?" Yi Long asked coldly. Actually, he knew that it was likely he was no match for Ling Han, because the technique that Ling Han had used on Huang Feng was something that he could not replicate. Yi Long was clearly outmatched, yet still jumped out. Wasn't he showing his loyalty? Ling Han nodded. "All right, you can make your move. However, let's make things clear first. I am a person who distinguishes between kindness and hatred. If others do not trifle with me, I will not trifle with anyone, either, but if anyone dares to trifle with me, I will return the favor 100-fold, 1,000-fold. Thus, you will die." Haha, what an arrogant tone. Do you think you're an ultimate elite of the 7th tier? Yi Long sneered. He leaped out, launching an attack at Ling Han. He was really going all out. Channeling a 7th grade seal, he was also brandishing a large flag in his hand. This was a heavenly venerate tool, which unleashed a frightening might. Everyone shook their head. The freakish Ling Han was not as simple as a 7th tier ultimate elite, he had even suppressed a 7th tier before. This was like trying to pick a losing battle. Who knew how embarrassing Yi Long's death would be? However, none of the members of the Feng Alliance recognized Ling Han. Seeing Yi Long unleash such a powerful offensive, they couldn't help but feel excited. They all cheered Yi Long on. Boom, Yi Long had already charged in front of Ling Han. He had no intention of killing Ling Han. Putting aside the fact that he knew that his abilities were inferior, even if he had that kind of strength, he would not do so. Killing was forbidden in the camp. He had his reservations. Thus, though this attack was fierce, it left a very great margin from fatality. Ling Han moved. Peng, peng, peng. Yi Long's attacks all bounced back, appearing extremely fragile. In the midst of Yi Long's shock, Ling Han's large hand penetrated his defenses, and he immediately already gripped his neck. Like a duck, he was instantly picked up by Ling Han. He could only flail his limbs weakly. Seeing this scene, the members of the Feng Alliance all gaped. They had been cheering for Yi Long for so long, yet this was the result. It was too embarrassing. The others didn't find this strange at all. Ling Han could even capture a 7th tier ultimate elite, what more a mere 3rd tier. Ling Han looked at Yi Long and asked, "Do you regret it?" Though Yi Long was shocked internally, when he recalled that there was still a sealed emotion heavenly venerable behind him, his courage was naturally increased. He was sure that sealed emotion heavenly venerable would definitely move to save him. Thus, he declared very arrogantly, "No regret. Don't be too arrogant, you." Peng. Before he could even finish his words, he had already turned into a mist of blood. Ling Han nonchalantly withdrew his hand. Blood sprayed in all directions, yet did not touch him at all. Wisps of life essence surged into his body, yet there was pitifully little of it. It did not cause the slightest ripple at all. It looked like he would probably have to kill an ultimate elite of the 7th tier if he wanted to see an obvious improvement, but 7th tiers were undying and indestructible, and could not be killed at all. Thus, this path had to have been severed. Of course, this was unless Ling Han could directly engulf dimensions like hysteria. Yi Long's remnant soul danced in the skies, and his spirit would very soon be destroyed and disperse. He looked at sealed emotion heavenly venerable, filled with resentment and disbelief. Just now, sealed emotion heavenly venerable actually did not even have the intention to move to save him. Yi Long had died too unjustly. Speaking of which, today he definitely had to be the #1 fool in history. Previously, he had been treated as the culprit, and almost beaten to death. Now, he had impatiently charged ahead, not even knowing who his opponent was. Just how unjust was his death? But so what if he was wronged? Very soon, he completely disappeared. Watching as a third tier turned into a mist of blood, everyone was shocked. Ling Han actually dared to kill in the camp. Hiss, no matter how strong Ling Han's abilities were, there was a bottom line that could not be crossed, and that was to destroy the most fundamental unity of the camp. Murder was definitely not allowed. Yet Ling Han did not take it to heart at all. With his present strength, what need was there for him to care about any kind of rules? He had already made his words clear. If anyone made a move on him, he would definitely repay them 100, 1,000 times over. If anyone made another move, they would have to bear the consequences. Sealed emotion, are you going to commit suicide, or should I send you on your way? Ling Han looked towards sealed emotion. On his list of people to kill, this was one of them. Sealed emotion only felt aggrieved. The brat that had not even been worth a mention in front of him in the past could now decide his life or death. He didn't think that he would be able to fortunately escape from the battle prowess of a 7th tier. And if he knew that Ling Han had asked that same question of Jiawu Heavenly Venerate in the past, who knew if he would feel sympathy from their shared fate, or fume with fury? He did not make a sound, but rather looked coldly at Ling Han. At this moment, no matter what he did, it would be useless. The initiative was in Ling Han's hands. Hihi, Ling Han, how mighty of you. A cold laugh rang out, and an extremely powerful aura surged out. A young man in fluttering white robes walked out. Feng Wuding. Chapter 3002, 3002 Persistence. Chapter 3002, 3002 Persistence. 3002 Persistence. Feng Wuding looked arrogantly at Ling Han. After more than 500 billion years, he still hadn't advanced to the 6th tier yet. However, he had already reached the peak stage of the 5th tier, and added with the fact that all 100 dimensions had been upgraded to the lower tier high-level dimensions, it was at least equivalent to 1,000 5th tiers working together to inject power into him, allowing his power to reach the late stage of the 7th tier. Now, his strength was already equal to that of Lin Yolian and the others, but he had more room for improvement. As long as he advanced to the 6th tier, then to say nothing of Lin Yulin and the others, he would be able to match even veteran 7th tiers such as Shatter Mountains and the others, or even to suppress them. So what if Ling Han hadn't died? They were both 5th tiers, and Feng Wuding believed that his strength had increased extremely quickly, so he was already unafraid. You are unconvinced? Ling Han asked smilingly. He did not have a good impression of Feng Wuding. It was only because of Zhu Heng and the others that he had repeatedly held back when he had had the chance. However, he had obtained the inheritance of the world's will from the Genesis world of the last era, and knew that Feng Wuding was not the son of destiny at all, so what was the point of holding back? He would kill him. Fuck, just the look of him was annoying. Feng Wuding sneered. Just because you have the battle prowess of 7th tier, you think you can do as you please? Let me tell you, you are wrong, overwhelmingly wrong. Ling Han cracked a smile. Today, I am determined to use my superior strength to kill you as well. What can you do about it? How dare you? Feng Wuding roared. Shio. His figure soared into the air, and he shouted, Ling Han, come up for a battle. Ling Han ignored him. Instead, he stared at sealed emotion, his eyes cold, as if he was looking at a dead man. Ling Han. Feng Wuding shouted loudly. He felt that he had been ignored, which caused him to feel a strong sense of shame and anger. To Feng Wuding, Ling Han was too much of a bully. The former was the son of destiny, the ultimate elite that possessed the might of 7th tier. Ling Han moved, and grabbed out at sealed emotion. How dare you? Feng Wuding also moved, delivering a palm strike at Ling Han. Boom, the two forces clashed, and the houses in the vicinity instantly collapsed one after another, and the city walls of the surrounding 1,500 kilometers crumbled at the same time. Peng, peng, Peng. Countless heavenly venerates were sent flying as if they were scarecrows. The entire encampment had become like a carpet, trembling in waves. Ling Han's attack had been blocked, but Feng Wuding's expression was still filled with a murderous aura. Ling Han actually dared not to give him face, and made a move on his subordinate right in front of him. Everyone retreated far away. The shockwave just now had caused a considerable number of people to be severely injured, so who would dare to approach blindly? Sealed Emotion also wanted to dodge, but that attack from Ling Han had been aimed at him. Even if it had been neutralized, he had still sustained more force. He was already severely injured, so how could he still move his body? He could only place his hopes on Feng Wuding's ability to block Ling Han's attack. Otherwise, he would definitely be killed. He casually sent out another palm strike, and it was still aimed at Sealed Emotion, Heavenly Venerable. Boom! Fundamental power condensed, turning into a colossal hand that pressed down on Sealed Emotion. Ling Han, you have gone too far. Feng Wuding roared in fury. It was not because Ling Han was determined to kill Sealed Emotion, Heavenly Venerable. In Feng Wuding's eyes, Sealed Emotion, Heavenly Venerable was not that important that he would be angered by his death. Instead, it was because Ling Han had ignored him. This kind of feeling was the true root of his fury. Xiao, Feng Wuding charged downwards. As he continued to dispel Ling Han's attacks, he continued to attack Ling Han so that he would not have the time to make another move. Peng, the two great forces clashed once more, and then both were annihilated. However, the aftermath of the attack reverberated, causing another large portion of the city wall to collapse, turning into ruins. Pu. Sealed Emotion threw up blood like mad. Even if Ling Han's attacks had not hit him, under the impact of the aftermath, he was still barely able to withstand it. He looked at Ling Han in shock. This definitely had to be deliberate on Ling Han's side. Looking around him, was there anyone else besides him? Was this guy trying to make him walk towards death in despair? His heart was filled with resentment. He actually had had a great many chances to kill Ling Han. When he had been in the celestial realm, that was needless to say. Even after he had gone to the flaming frost realm, he still had had a great many chances. However, because he had been wary of Zhu Hang and the others, he had not made a move. Afterwards, it had also been because of the news that Ling Han had been crippled that he had not taken Ling Han seriously at all. A moment's mistake would lead to eternal regret. Feng Wuding finally arrived. He brandished his fists furiously, blasting towards Ling Han. Ling Han casually exchanged blows with him. At the same time, he could also attack Sealed Emotion, Heavenly Venerable, forcing Feng Wuding to continuously dispel his attacks. Feng Wuding was clearly the one on the offensive, but he was completely flustered, appearing to be in a very sorry state. This kind of fierce battle naturally attracted everyone's attention. Seeing Feng Wuding in such a state, everyone could only stare dumbfounded. Could it be that it was definite that Ling Han's strength would overwhelm Feng Wuding's? Otherwise, how could Feng Wuding be in such a sorry state? Those people from the Feng Alliance were all rendered speechless, and looked towards Sealed Emotion. Now, he had instead become the key to the battle between Ling Han and Feng Wuding. One wanted to kill him, and the other wanted to protect him. Whoever was stronger would be decided by whether Sealed Emotion was dead or alive. Regarding this, Sealed Emotion naturally wanted nothing more than to curse. Why were they treating him like a punching bag? Even if Feng Wuding had dispersed every attack from Ling Han, Sealed Emotion was still heavily injured under the shockwaves of the aftermath. He would probably be dead in about 100 moves at most. How wronged would his death then be? In a battle between two great elites, he was sandwiched in the middle, and became cannon fodder. Even if he died, he would be an eternal joke. Sealed Emotion tried his best to leave this eye of the storm, but he had just mustered his remaining power when a shockwave swept over. Peng, the shockwave caused his whole body to tremble, and he spluttered out a mouthful of blood. His vision became completely black, and he almost passed out. Ling Han, fight me if you can. What's the point of using such means? Feng Wuding roared in fury. He thought that if he went all out in battle, he would definitely not lose to Ling Han. Ling Han had purposefully used Sealed Emotion, Heavenly Venerable, to impede him, preventing him from unleashing his full might in his attacks. Foam Wuding had once thought of giving up sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable and focusing all his power on attack, but if he gave up on his own subordinate in full public, who would still follow him in the future? Hence, he could only try his best to protect sealed emotion, though from the look of things, sealed emotion was definitely done for. Ling Han ignored him. He didn't care about the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable. Similarly, he didn't care about Foam Wuding, either. He only cared about resolving his matters in the order of priority, and placed Foam Wuding as second place on his list of priorities. After battling for a few more rounds, sealed emotion was already in a tragic state. His limbs had already been forcefully destroyed by the terrifying power. Ling Han did not feel the slightest bit of sympathy. Previously, how many people of the celestial realm had been killed because of the selfish desires of sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable, Jowu Heavenly Venerable, and Green Flames Heavenly Venerable? Sympathy? Was sealed emotion worth it? Did he deserve it? Brother Ling, enough is enough. A gentle voice rang out. Lin Yolian appeared, advising Ling Han. Xiu. Xin Chihu, Wu Haoyang, and Bai Mifen also appeared in quick succession. 4 people with 7th tier battle prowess. Yet Ling Han only acted as if he had not heard anything. Today, no one could stop him from killing sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable and Foam Wuding. There was no one, definitely no one. Chapter 3003 3003 Might of a Single Strike. Chapter 3003 3003 Might of a Single Strike. 3003 Might of a Single Strike. Ling Han attacked continuously, but did not use all his strength. He wanted to make sealed emotion breathe his last breath in despair and helplessness. Just how arrogant had this bastard been in the past? This was karma. Ling Han, stop. Xin Chihu called out. He was the first to move, and joined forces with Foam Wuding to stop Ling Han. Ling Han smiled calmly, and slightly increased his power, blocking the 2 great prodigies. Meanwhile, his other hand continued to attack Heavenly Venerable sealed emotion. Fuck. Witnessing such a scene, everyone's eyes were bulging. It didn't matter that they were not familiar with the battle prowess of a 7th tier. However, as long as they had eyes, they could easily tell that Ling Han was more than powerful enough to battle against 2 opponents at the same time. Otherwise, how could he still have the leisure to attack Heavenly Venerable sealed emotion? Foam Wuding and Xin Chihu both roared in fury and tried their best, but it was useless. In front of Ling Han's power of peak stage 7th tier, even though it was only a difference of the late stage versus the peak stage of the 7th tier, there was still an incomparable gap. Sealed emotion sustained this blow, and blood spurted from all over his body. He could only exhale, and no longer inhale. If he sustained another blow, he would definitely die. Brother Ling, don't make a grave mistake. Lin Yolian also rushed over. In her heart, of course the importance of Ling Han surpassed the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerables. In fact, she didn't even know who the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable was. However, it was precisely because she valued Ling Han that she couldn't allow Ling Han to make such a grave mistake. Otherwise, if a question of principle was touched, no one would be able to save him. However, she did not know that Ling Han had actually already started a massacre long ago. Wu Haoyang moved as well. 4 people with 7th tier battle prowess had joined forces to fight Ling Han. Boom, boom, boom. The 4 prodigies worked together, and finally managed to block Ling Han. However, this was only just enough to tie with Ling Han, which was still not enough insurance. There were a few times that Ling Han almost broke out of the siege successfully, which rendered their blockade ineffective. Big brother, sorry. Bai Mifen also let out a battle cry and joined the battle. He hoped even less that Ling Han would stand on everyone's opposing side. After all, Ling Han was still not a 7th tier yet. If he really provoked all 7th tiers into joining forces against him, that would definitely be a path of death. Thus, Bai Mifen definitely had to stop Ling Han from committing murder. Ling Han revealed a slight smile. His fighting spirit had finally been roused. Come. Ling Han laughed loudly, and all the 7th grade seals channeled, instantly increasing his power by 2,000 times. Peng, peng, peng. He exchanged blows with Shin Chihu and the others. With the protection of the powers of dimension, the rebound could not take effect on his body at all. His body was like a seventh tier's, indestructible and undying. With his display of might, Shin Chihu and the others couldn't bear it anymore. They hurriedly channeled their respective strongest heavenly venerable seals, meeting Ling Han's attack. Suppress. Feng Wuding roared loudly. He released his dimensions, which created a powerful pressure. 100 lower-tier high-level dimensions appeared at the same time, forming a terrifying pressure. Even Shin Chihu and the others were slightly affected. Ling Han cracked a smile. Since they have been released, don't take them back. He launched a powerful offensive, brandishing the fists of fury and unleashing his full power. A terrifying power surged, forcibly compressing this dimension, and shrinking it to the size of a palm. He grabbed it, and then threw it out heavily. Peng! This dimension directly assaulted the sealed emotion heavenly venerable, as fast as a streak of light. Sealed emotion was greatly shocked, and his eyes involuntarily widened, revealing a powerful fear. When this attack reached him, he would definitely die. He didn't want to die. After so many years of hard cultivation, he had cultivated from his initial level of the first tier to his present level of fourth tier, and he had only spent over an epoch. This talent was truly amazing. He still had higher hopes for himself. Perhaps, he could reach the fifth tier, or even sixth tier, but if he was hit by this attack, then everything would be for naught. But to say nothing of the fact that he was already heavily injured, even if his battle prowess was undamaged, what ability would he have to dodge or parry the attack of a seventh tier? He could only place his hopes on Feng Wuding and the others. However, could Feng Wuding and the others stop Ling Han? They couldn't. This blow was as fast as a streak of light, and Ling Han had even taken the initiative to attack, detaining all 5 elites so that they had no time to interfere. Peng! The dimension crushed the sealed emotion heavenly venerable into pieces, and this dimension crashed into the city wall. The defense that could have blocked the attack of a sixth tier instantly crumbled, revealing a massive hole. As a result, this dimension also crumbled into over a dozen pieces, which continued to advance forwards. Because it had crumbled, the core power had gone berserk, and this dimension was beginning to grow larger. Just how large was a lower-tier high-level dimension? Boom! As it continued to charge forward, heaven and earth would truly collapse. Coincidentally, the base of Hysteria's troops was in that direction as well. So what if there was a distance of 5,000 kilometers between them? In less than the time for a single breath, these massive dimensional shards had already arrived. Those heavenly venerable tier monsters were completely unprepared. A calamity instantly arrived. With a single blow, this base no longer existed, and who knew how many of Hysteria's troops had been killed or wounded? Meanwhile, the remaining dimensional shards continued to fly forward, entering the territory controlled by Hysteria. As for what damage they could cause, that was only something that Hysteria needed to worry about. On the side of the profound negative realm, everyone was gaping and dumbfounded, stunned by Ling Han. Firstly, they were stunned because of Ling Han's strength. Even the battle prowess of 5 great elites with 7th tier battle prowess couldn't stop him from killing. Secondly, Ling Han was too brazen. As long as one wasn't a 7th tier, he wasn't truly invincible. He actually dared to kill people in the camp, and not just one at that. This time, he had really gotten into big trouble. Who would be able to save him? Feng Wuding's expression was baleful, and he did not make another move, because sealed emotion was already dead, and it looked like even if the 5 elites joined forces, they would not be able to suppress Ling Han, so what was the point of fighting? He pointed at Ling Han, and said, "You have already caused a great calamity. Are you going to kneel down and be restrained, or should we act?" Ling Han cracked a smile. "I have no plans to be restrained, nor can I be restrained. There is still another person I have to kill." As he said this, he stared fixedly at Feng Wuding. He had tolerated this guy for long enough. Today, he was definitely going to kill him. Feng Wuding faltered for a moment, and then laughed loudly. "Ling Han, your opinion of yourself is too high. You still want to kill me?" If I wish it, you will be a dead man, Ling Han said calmly, revealing a powerful confidence in his voice. Ling Han, not only did you publicly commit murder in the encampment, you even damaged the city defense. What kind of serious crime is this? Feng Wuding continued to rebuke Ling Han. On the other hand, Lin Yolian and the others all fell silent. As if to illustrate Feng Wuding's words, endless killing intent rushed over, and a large number of Hysteria's troops surged over from all directions. Chapter 3004 Attaining Godhood in a Single Battle. Chapter 3004 Attaining Godhood in a Single Battle. 3004 Attaining Godhood in a Single Battle. Everyone was shocked. Hysteria's army had actually charged over. This was too sudden. Furthermore, their city walls had all been destroyed, and their defenses had been greatly reduced, while there was a new type of monster added to Hysteria's army. It could self-explode and deliver peak-stage 7th-tier destructive power at any time. It would cause terrifying damage to both humans and the environment. If one wanted to deal with this kind of monster, they would have to detect it from a very far distance away, and then use a long-distance attack to cause it to self-explode. This kind of monster had astonishing destructive power, but its own defenses were extremely weak. Even second tiers or third tiers could easily kill them. Hence, if this kind of monster was discovered and destroyed in advance, it would explode within the ranks of Hysteria's army, and instead cause great damage to Hysteria's army. The problem was that they were too difficult to detect. Moreover, such monsters were actually hidden among the masses of Hysteria's army, which were as vast as an ocean. It was almost impossible to destroy them in advance. Now, their troops were at the foot of the city wall. Engage the enemy. Lin Yolian, Xin Chihu, and the others all issued orders. Meanwhile, Feng Wuding glared at Ling Han, and said sharply, "Just look at what you've done. Humph, even if you have the battle prowess of a 7th tier, you can't do as you please like this." He was going to try his best to add charges to Ling Han's name. Otherwise, the battle prowess of a 7th tier was practically invincible, so someone like that naturally had to be preserved at all costs in order to fight against Hysteria. Thus, he definitely had to name Ling Han as someone who couldn't be exempted even if he had performed a great merit. For example, in the present situation, if innumerable heavenly venerates died because of Ling Han, then Lin Luo, Zhu Heng, and the others wouldn't be able to defend Ling Han even if they wanted to. Otherwise, just the death of sealed emotion heavenly venerable would not be enough. Ling Han smiled calmly. "Of course, I have done a good deed. I have drawn all of Hysteria's troops here, and they can be destroyed in one go. You are indeed Hysteria's subordinate," Feng Wuding said through gritted teeth. This crime was a huge one indeed. Once it was confirmed that Ling Han was Hysteria's subordinate, then all the 7th tiers would do their best to kill him. Trash. Barking all day long like a dog. Ling Han scoffed, and said, "Fine, I'll deal with those ugly guys outside first, then come and take your head." Xiao, he charged out. At this moment, Ling Han didn't need to worry about anything. Even if the 7th tiers joined forces to suppress him, he wouldn't be afraid. However, he wasn't someone who didn't have a bottom line and couldn't differentiate between right and wrong. Of course, Feng Wuding had to be killed. However, Ling Han definitely couldn't allow this to be the reason for the entire barrier to be buried alongside him. There was no need to rush. In any case, Feng Wuding couldn't run away. Ling Han faced Hysteria's troops, who were now charging over like a tsunami, directly. Previously, he had killed at least 90% of Hysteria's army by tossing out the dimension, but even if only 10% was left, this number was still astonishingly great, covering the sky and the earth, and forming a dark mass. Ling Han was calm and unperturbed. He stretched out his right hand, and Wang, power condensed, turning into a light orb that flickered with a strange brilliance, rippling like water. "Go." He tossed the ball of light casually. It wasn't until the light orb had reached the depths of Hysteria's army that it came to a standstill. "Explode," Ling Han said softly. Boom, the light orb instantly detonated, and a terrifying wave of energy exploded, sweeping out in all directions. Peng, peng, peng. Wherever the energy storm surged past, Hysteria's troops were all turned into ashes. So what if they were 6th tiers? They were completely unable to withstand a single blow. Ling Han's hand moved continuously, throwing out one light orb after another. He was condensing the power of all his dimensions, which was equivalent to the bombardment of a small Genesis world, so the might was naturally terrifying. Boom! 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 Hysteria's army instantly suffered a calamity, especially when one of the light balls killed an exploding monster, causing the latter to also explode with destructive power at the peak stage of the 7th tier. 2 energy storms at the peak stage of the 7th tier clashed with each other, either annihilating or strengthening, creating an even more terrifying destructive effect. After Ling Han had unleashed several hundred light orbs, the entire Hysteria's army were only left with merely less than 1,000. They were once again killed off by Ling Han swiftly. With a snap of his fingers, every one of the monsters was being annihilated. In an instant, they all fell down from the skies. Thus far, Hysteria's army was completely wiped out, and none of them even rushed to the top of the city walls. At this moment, complete silence fell upon the entire place, and everyone could only look at Ling Han with shock. Out of all the heroes of the world, who else could it be but him? He was just one person, and with a single move, millions and millions of Hysteria's troops were turned into ashes. He was like a stabilizing force, even the mountains couldn't be shaken. As long as he was here, what need was there for the city walls? One person was comparable to an army of thousands. He was unlike the 7th tier ultimate elites. If they fought here, the 7th tier would be damaging regulations. They themselves would cause damage to heaven and earth, which would be equivalent to helping Hysteria. Thus, in this level of the battlefield, people with the battle prowess of 7th tier like Lin Yolian, Feng Wuding, and the others were more practical than real 7th tiers even if their strength was inferior. And Ling Han was even more awesome, being able to deal with an entire army all by himself. There really was no one else like him. Ling Han turned around and faced the people inside the city wall. His black robes fluttered, as if he was about to leave swiftly with the wind. There was complete silence. No one could speak. They were completely captivated. Ling Han, even if you... Boom! Feng Wuding was just about to reprimand Ling Han when the entire area exploded with cheers like thunder. It was as if everyone had gone mad, looking at Ling Han with infatuation. At this moment, they all thought of Ling Han as a god that could save them all. Standing proudly as one man, accepting the cheers of tens of thousands of heavenly venerates. In comparison, whether it was Lin Yolian, Wu Haoyang, Xin Chihu, Feng Wuding, or Bai Mifen, they all paled in comparison. This was like a stone being compared against a precious jade. One would be able to distinguish which was the bright and dazzling one with a single glance. At the borders, Ling Han alone was enough. When Feng Wuding saw this, he couldn't help but feel endless jealousy. He was the son of destiny, he was the one who was currently receiving the cheers and admiration of these 10 million people should have been him, and not Ling Han. However, not only were the people of the Genesis world filled with admiration towards Ling Han, but even the seeds from the previous generation were also the same. They didn't even cast a second glance at him, the alliance leader of the Feng Alliance. He gritted his teeth in hatred, flames of fury shooting from his eyes. With such a great merit, and such an important capability, who would agree to execute Ling Han? Could it be that this great mountain would be resting above his head for the rest of his life? Could it be that he would have to live in Ling Han's shadow for an eternity? He wanted to kill. Ling Han pressed his hands down, and everyone's voices instantly disappeared. They all raised their heads to look at him, their eyes exuding admiration. It was as if with a single command from Ling Han, they would be willing to attack cities and strongholds for Ling Han's sake. In fact, they would be unafraid even if they had to counterattack Hysteria's main camp. When Feng Wuding saw this, he almost died in fury. He had relied on his identity as the son of destiny and the might of 5 7th-tier ultimate elites, but it only made the seeds of the Genesis world of the last era unite around him and obey his commands. However, look at Ling Hanhe became the undisputed leader after just one battle. Chapter 3005, 3005 Pinnacle Defense. Chapter 3005, 3005 Pinnacle Defense. 3005 Pinnacle Defense. Ling Han looked coldly at Feng Wuding. Feng Wuding naturally wouldn't back down. He also looked back at Ling Han. With the two men looking at each other so affectionately, it was very likely that the masses who were not aware of what was really going on between them would think that there was some kind of indescribable love affair between them, but those people only had to observe the killing intent that was exuding from them, and they would know that there was only one kind of relationship between the two of them, and that was deadly rivalry. Feng Wuding. I've said it before, you're going to die today, Ling Han said calmly. When these words fell, everyone was greatly shocked. Although killing sealed emotion, Yi Long, Huang Feng, and so on were serious crimes, Ling Han had displayed sufficient strength, and thus possessed privileges that were above the law. He could destroy Hysteria's army with a single move. This kind of talent was too important, and was definitely not someone that a few fourth tiers or third tiers could exchange for. However, Feng Wuding was different. He was the son of destiny, having obtained the inheritance of the Genesis world of the last era, and was the key to destroying Hysteria. One could only resist Hysteria's attacks, while the other could destroy Hysteria. Who would you say was more important? Hence, if Ling Han really killed Feng Wuding, the matter would become serious. Moreover, Lin Yolian and the others wouldn't allow Ling Han to do this. They would definitely try everything in their abilities to stop him. Humph, do you think you're even worthy? Feng Wuding said haughtily. Ling Han shook his head. What *T son of destiny? Since long ago, he had not believed that Feng Wuding was some son of destiny, because there was nothing special about him. Yes, 100 dimensions could indeed crush any prodigy. For example, Lin Yolian and the others had only created 2 dimensions in their bodies. However, when compared with Ling Han, 100 dimensions were practically trash. Even if Feng Wuding was allowed to reach the 7th tier, would he be able to match Hysteria? Absolutely not. Thinking about it, it was very simple. Hysteria had similarly never stopped cultivating, and furthermore, it was endlessly devouring dimensions. Its abilities were constantly strengthening, so what basis did Feng Wuding have to think that his rate of cultivation could surpass Hysteria's? Others would have an end to their cultivation, and that was why they could be surpassed, but faced with an existence that had no limits and kept improving, how were they supposed to surpass it? And Feng Wuding called himself the son of destiny? You dare to slander me? Feng Wuding said balefully. He had really tolerated Ling Han enough. *T, I'll kill you and see what the heavens will do, Ling Han said calmly. With a flash, he was already charging towards Feng Wuding. There was a sequence of killing, and now it was Feng Wuding's turn. Feng Wuding naturally had to accept the challenge. He wasn't an indestructible 7th tier, so how could he dare to let Ling Han attack him randomly? He would battle. Unfortunately, once Ling Han became serious, how could Feng Wuding possibly be a match for him? Very soon, he was being suppressed, and it would only be a matter of time before he was killed. Ling Han, Xin Chihu and the others, a group of 4 with battle prowess of 7th tier, hurriedly rushed forwards to attack Ling Han together to decrease the suppression on Feng Wuding. Ling Han humphed as he channeled his powers of dimension into an invincible defense. He then ignored the attacks of Xin Chihu and the others, and simply targeted Feng Wuding. Xin Chihu and the others didn't know that Ling Han's defenses were already of the 7th tier. Seeing that he actually let go and allowed them to attack as they liked, they couldn't help but cease their attacks and send them elsewhere. What surprised Ling Han was the fact that Lin Yolian, Bai Mifen, and Wu Haoyang acted in the nick of time, which he could understand. However, Xin Chihu actually forced himself to stop in time, which he found to be odd. It was too strange. However, even if the 4 of them had ceased attacking, there were still some micro-attacks that swept over towards Ling Han. After all, 7th tier attacks were too fast, so how could they possibly be withdrawn all at once? However, when these attacks landed on Ling Han, they didn't even hurt a single hair on Ling Han's head, and yet they still had some effect. After all, it was the power of 7th tiers, which managed to slow down the speed at which Ling Han pounced, and allowed Feng Wuding the chance to retreat. What? Lin Yolian and the others were all shocked. Even if the attacks that landed on Ling Han were only a part of their full-blown attacks, a 7th tier was still a 7th tier, so how could their attacks possibly be taken head-on? However, Ling Han was completely unscathed. What the heck was this? 7th tier defense. Shin Chihu spat out word for word. Although Lin Yolian and the others didn't want to believe it, facts spoke louder than words. Heavens, for a 5th tier heavenly venerate to possess 7th tier battle prowess was already inconceivable, but to actually have a physique of 7th tier, was this person still a 5th tier? Hiss, this time Ling Han had really gained the confidence to ignore the rules. Even if he was out of control, so what? He was immortal and indestructible, so who could discipline him? It wasn't just them. The spectators around them had also gotten numb with shock. How could Ling Han possibly be as strong as this? Even though Feng Wuding thought he was extraordinary, he still felt a strong chill rise up from the bottom of his heart. The opponent whom he was facing was a true 7th tier. Both his opponent's power and defense had reached the pinnacle of the world, and he could neither be killed nor wounded, while Feng Wuding's only fate was to be pummeled by his opponent. This kind of battle was absolutely unfair. Ling Han merely stared at Feng Wuding and asked calmly, "Who else wants to stop me?" "Brother Ling, please reconsider. Feng Wuding is the son of destiny of the Genesis world of the last era. It is very possible that he is key to eliminating hysteria," Lin Yolian said seriously. She naturally still wanted to persuade him. This time, what she was worried about was not Ling Han's safety, but the overall situation. Ling Han laughed. "This so-called son of destiny is only a claim from Chong Yang and the others, and I am filled with doubt about their word. A dignified ultimate elite of the 7th tier would actually lie, and through his own observations and the theory of the world's will, Ling Han had confirmed that Feng Wuding was definitely not some son of destiny. It was extremely likely that Chong Yang and the others were hiding their own secrets. The 7th tiers were absolutely tight-lipped about the secret, which might be a shockingly huge conspiracy. "Big brother, it's better to stop," Bai Mifen also advised. Ling Han shook his head and pointed at Feng Wuding. "I already said, I will definitely kill him today." Feng Wuding was furious. Was Ling Han really treating him like a meat bun? He humphed. "Ling Han, do you think it would be so easy for you to kill me?" "You'll naturally find out when you die," Ling Han said calmly. At this moment, Feng Wuding was no longer worthy of being his opponent from the very beginning. He hadn't taken Feng Wuding to heart. Ling Han charged out, throwing punches with both fists, and furiously attacking Feng Wuding. Feng Wuding, Lin Yolian, and the others moved in quick succession. The 5 with 7th tier battle prowess joined hands together once again to stop Ling Han from committing a crime. But could they really stop him? Now that the battle had begun, Shin Chihu and the others naturally had no qualms. They went all out, but after a few moves, they finally knew why a real 7th tier was so impressive and awesome. He was immortal and indestructible. When their attacks landed on Ling Han's body, they only caused a spattering of multiple streaks of light, and were completely unable to wound Ling Han in the slightest. However, they had to disperse Ling Han's attacks, or they would be severely injured even if the attacks were to scrape past them. This kind of battle was too unfair. Ling Han only needed to attack, and could use his full abilities, while Feng Wuding and the others could only ward off his attacks, suffering indescribably. Chapter 3006, 3006 Escape. Chapter 3006, 3006 Escape. 3006 Escape. A massive battle erupted between 6 powerful individuals possessing the battle prowess of the 7th tier. It was an astonishing sight. Boom, boom, boom. The city walls crumbled one after another as the entire camp was reduced to rubble. Countless fissures blanketed the earth. Despite being held back by the joint efforts of 5 7th-tier battle prowess-wielding elites, Ling Han still had the upper hand and took most of the initiative. He was unperturbed by the attacks of Shin Chihu and the others, focusing solely on Feng Wuding. Peng, peng, peng. Every attack that landed on him would turn into specks of light. On the other hand, The 5 prodigies needed to focus all their efforts to face his attack. This was a tough battle for Shin Chihu and the others. Against an enemy that they couldn't kill or damage, there was nothing left to feel but despair. Fortunately, their attacks were still capable of pushing Ling Han back. Else, Feng Wuding would have long perished by now. Even so, Feng Wuding had also suffered several blows and sustained relatively severe injuries. He spat out blood. This was too shocking. If things were to continue, there would be a high chance of him being killed by Ling Han. What should I do? He wasn't willing to die. After all, he already possessed a 7th tier's battle prowess while at the 5th tier. Who would be able to challenge him once he advanced to the 6th or 7th tier? He had so much potential ahead of him. How could he die this early? Feng Wuding clenched his teeth and ran away. He could no longer continue with this battle. That would simply be suicidal. Ling Han gave chase, but Lin Yolian and the others tried their best to stop him and help Feng Wuding seize the chance to survive. You cannot stop me, Ling Han barked, releasing the power of the few 100,000 dimensions stored inside him and generating a tremendous pressure. Boom! The surrounding area sank several dozen kilometers into the ground, compressing the earth tightly together. Shin Chihu and the others grunted in pain as their faces paled. After all, they were not true 7th tiers yet. Against such an overbearing pressure, it was normal for them to feel pain. Ling Han rushed out and sent a punch. Feng Wuding didn't turn back to look. He quickly released all 4 types of fundamental powers to form 4 wings of dark steel. Condensing his power of dimension into thrust, he flapped his wings and sped up ahead. Boom! Ling Han's attack couldn't catch up to him, and missed its mark. With a scoff, Ling Han also charged full speed ahead behind Feng Wuding. He channeled all the power in his body and increased his speed. Lin Yolian and the others were also hot on their heels behind them. At this rate, in another hour or maybe even less, Ling Han would catch up with Feng Wuding. Where could Feng Wuding possibly run off to? The answer was simple. Who else would be able to stop Ling Han in this entire universe? That would be the true 7th tier elites. The only defense against an indestructible body and an insurmountable strength was someone who benefited from those same advantages. Feng Wuding was trying to escape into a different spatial level and seek out Chongyang and the others on the main battlefield. Only those 5 powerhouses would be able to save him now. This was the realm battlefield, and even though there was a spatial barrier between the 2 places, the distance was not far. In less than 15 minutes, Feng Wuding managed to reach the entrance to the next spatial level. He didn't hesitate before diving headlong into the main battlefield. Ling Han was right behind him. He also rushed in without any sort of hesitation. After a while, Shin Chihu and the rest appeared. After taking a slight pause, the 4 of them ultimately decided to rush into the main battlefield as well. This place was too dangerous as Hysteria's main body could be found here. It possessed strength that surpassed even the pinnacle of 7th tiers because it had cultivated its powers of dimension to an impossibly high level. This allowed it to suppress the 6 types of fundamental powers. Without an indestructible body, no one would be able to receive a single blow. Hence, those that were in the main battlefield were all 7th tiers in the truest sense. But in order to stop Ling Han, Shin Chihu and the others didn't have the time to worry about the dangers. They were mildly consoled by the fact that there were still 14 7th tiers fighting back against Hysteria over here. Feng Wuding was running as fast as he could. He was already able to sense the terrifying pressure of Hysteria. This meant that its main body was already close by, and with it Chongyang and the others as well. He sent out a signal with his spirit to ask the 5 elites to come and save him. However, Ling Han had already closed in on him, and was launching a furious punch. Feng Wuding had to parry this blow. Otherwise, before Chongyang and the others could come save him, Ling Han would already put a hole in his chest. Peng! 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 The 2 of them engaged in an intense battle. However, without Shin Chihu and the others holding Ling Han back, Feng Wuding quickly found himself on the precipice of life and death. In the distance, Chongyang and the others were in shock. They all received the help signal from Feng Wuding. Not good. Their expressions drastically changed as they immediately stopped what they were doing. "What's wrong with you all?" Bai Fan asked. Hysteria was even more powerful now. Even with 14 seventh tiers joining hands, they were having difficulty stopping its progression. And with the 5 of them suddenly stopping, the pressure felt by the rest instantly surged. Chong Yang and the others didn't bother to give a response, and just up and left. As they departed, Lin Luo and the rest were immediately pushed back over 500 kilometers from their defensive line. The 5 elites rushed off as though Feng Wuding was their own flesh and blood. No, not even their own child would see such preferential treatment. They quickly rushed towards Feng Wuding. Given the vision of 7th tiers, they quickly noticed 2 people locked in battle up ahead. One of them was Feng Wuding, the other was Ling Han. Ling Han, heavenly venerate Shatter Mountains, was furious. Ling Han was the only person who ever left a mark of shame in his life. And now, Ling Han was trying to kill Feng Wuding. Do you know what Feng Wuding symbolizes? Boom. Not just heavenly venerate Shatter Mountains, but even Chong Yang and the rest were speeding up as much as they could. They could see that Feng Wuding was already at the end of his ropes. "Brat, stop at once." Heavenly venerate Big Dipper yelled. Boom. His voice carried a powerful wave of energy, causing the space to crumble and shatter. Fortunately, this was the main area of conflict on the 2-realm battlefield. As such, the heaven and earth had long been destroyed. Even if the space continued to shatter, no more damage could be inflicted. Xin Chihu and the rest were also finally closing in from behind. Feng Wuding was overjoyed to see help closing in from both sides. He was definitely safe now. "Ling Han, you can't kill me. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever," he boasted. Giving lip was about the most he could do at this point. "Is that so?" Ling Han scoffed. Releasing the energy from the several 100,000 dimensions stored inside him, he formed a terrifying mass of power, and punched forth with all his anger and killing intent. Peng! The fist turned to light as it landed on Feng Wuding's chest. A pillar of light then pierced through his chest, coming out from the back. Brat! Chong Yang and the others were already upon Ling Han, unleashing their strongest attacks on him. Ling Han protected himself against their blows. Even though his defenses had already reached the 7th tier, he would still likely be suppressed when facing a 7th tier's attack. This was not the result he wanted. "You think too highly of yourself." Chong Yang and the rest scoffed. How could a mere 5th tier heavenly venerate dare to face all 5 of them alone and challenge their true 7th tier strength? Was that not just courting death? Peng, peng, peng. However, when the attacks landed, the 5 ultimate elites couldn't help revealing expressions of shock. Ling Han blocked their attacks as though it was nothing. It didn't seem like he took any damage at all. Gasp! Could this kid be a 7th tier already? Chapter 3007, 3007 killed. Chapter 3007, 3007 killed. 3007 killed. Chong Yang and the others all wore expressions of disbelief. For a 5th tier to possess 7th tier battle prowess was already a historical feat, but at least there was a Feng Wuding that could compare. But now, Ling Han actually possessed the defense of a 7th tier, which was terrifying. This meant that Ling Han had truly crossed into the ranks of big shots. From now onwards, he would be immortal and indestructible, and there was no need for him to take anyone seriously or take them to heart. In fact, even if the Genesis world was destroyed, and hysteria conquered the world, he would not die, and could still live freely. Having reached this level, what was there for him to be afraid of? "Ah!" Feng Wuding screamed in pain. Chong Yang and the others all looked over. At first, they had not taken Feng Wuding's injury to heart. After all, this blow had not struck his mind, so there would be no life-threatening danger. Thus, hearing Feng Wuding's screams, they all felt slight disdain. "You have 7th tier battle prowess, for better or worse, so how could you scream like this?" However, when they could see Feng Wuding clearly, they couldn't help but feel shocked. Feng Wuding's whole body was glowing, as if there was a small sun inside his body. This wasn't caused by him, but rather happened because the power of Ling Han's attack hadn't dissipated at all. Instead, it was beginning to wreak havoc inside his body. Ah! Feng Wuding screamed again. His limbs were stretched straight, and his mouth was gaping widely. Boom! Pillars of light shot out of all his apertures, endless power gushing out. Visibly, his skin was beginning to split apart, blood spurting out. No! Chong Yang and the others were all shocked. They could sense that Feng Wuding's life essence was boiling and rushing towards an inconceivable height. This was extremely abnormal. When one had reached their heights, everything was within a controllable range. Now that Feng Wuding's life essence was boiling, it was even more vigorous than that of the 5 of them added together. This was not because Feng Wuding's strength had soared to an inconceivable extent, but rather because there was a great disorder in his bodily functions. Someone with 7th-tier battle prowess would actually lose control of his body. There was only one possibility for this: Feng Wuding was about to die, and that was why the phenomenon of losing control had appeared. They had placed too much hope on Feng Wuding, and it was not as simple as merely hoping that he would destroy Hysteria. If Feng Wuding died, their hopes would naturally come to nothing. The 5 of them hurriedly shot out a palm strike each, and pressed it on Feng Wuding's body, wanting to forcefully suppress the disorder in his body. Emptiness because all the organs in his body had been destroyed, and chaos because his body was filled with boiling power, wreaking havoc and surging. The 5 of them hurriedly poured their power into Feng Wuding's mind. Then, they all looked despondent. That was because Feng Wuding's mind had already been destroyed, and his spirit had also been destroyed. There were only slivers left, still struggling desperately. However, no matter what was attempted, Feng Wuding's death was already a closed case. If he did not have such a high cultivation level, and was only a celestial king, the 5 great ultimate elites might still be able to defy nature and change his fate, forcefully extending his lifespan, but it could not be done now. Heavenly venerates were despised by the heaven and earth. It would all end with their deaths, and there was no chance for them to start over again. Save me! Save me! Feng Wuding hadn't died completely yet, and there was still a remnant soul fluttering, reaching out shakily towards the 5 ultimate elites, filled with the longing for life. Chong Yang and the others were all indifferent, and ignored him completely. A living Feng Wuding was extremely important, but if he was dead, ho-ho, who would take him to heart? Did he really think that Chong Yang and the others treasured him so much because they prized his talent? Faced with the incredibly cold expressions of Chong Yang and the others, Feng Wuding was filled with despair. In fact, he even felt a kind of resentment. Why won't you guys save me? Why was it like this? He looked at Ling Han again. This person had said that he would kill him today, and it was clear that Ling Han succeeded. Feng Wuding was filled with defiance. He was a supreme prodigy, so why did the heavens still give birth to Ling Han to compete with him? In fact, they even allowed him to die in Ling Han's hands. If he had another chance, would he still make an enemy of Ling Han? In truth, was there really an irresolvable enmity between the 2 of them? Feng Wuding asked himself honestly, yet discovered that the enmity between himself and Ling Han had been completely started by him alone. Furthermore, Ling Han had repeatedly spared him, and had only robbed him. He regretted it, but this had also become his last thought. Peng! His body exploded, while his remnant soul turned into ashes, and then disappeared. Instantly, astonishing life essence surged towards Ling Han, turning into majestic energy. Brat! Heavenly venerate Chong Yang stared fixedly at Ling Han, his killing intent boiling. I'm not deaf, so I can hear you, Ling Han said calmly. His body was passively absorbing that energy, causing his cultivation level to experience a very significant increase. Feng Wuding was equivalent to a 7th-tier heavenly venerate. You ruined our hopes. Even if we shatter you into pieces, it will not be able to appease the hatred in our heart. Shatter Mountain said, his black locks billowing in the wind. He had gone mad with fury. Previously, his doppelganger had been destroyed by Ling Han. Though he had also been very furious back then, that could not compare to how he was now. Ling Han chuckled. Which one of you is Feng Wuding's illegitimate father? But looking at the anxious expressions on your faces, It seems like all of you are his fathers. You're courting death. Heavenly Venerate Shatter Mountains roared furiously, and was the first to attack. Boom, he used the power of millions and millions, and blasted it towards Ling Han. Ling Han let out a battle cry, and began exchanging blows with Heavenly Venerate Shatter Mountains without showing any weakness. Peng! 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 Space exploded continuously. The collision between peak stage 7th tiers had extremely terrifying destructive power. Shio, shio, shio. Another few figures swept over. Naturally, it was Lin Luo, Zhu Heng, and the other 7th tier ultimate elites. When they saw Ling Han was presently in an intense fight with Shatter Mountains, everyone's eyes widened slightly. Ling Han was actually capable of matching the battle prowess of a peak stage 7th tier? This was too inconceivable. This brat clearly had not advanced to the 7th tier, so how could his physique be so strong as to be capable of facing a 7th tier head-on? A big shot. Another big shot had appeared among them. He was immortal and indestructible, and could exist for eternity. He could not be killed, whoever his opponent was. Even if he wanted to commit suicide, it was impossible. Meanwhile, Golden Silk Moth's expression was strange. His mouth was half gaping, and his heart was filled with mixed feelings. He had been suppressed by Ling Han. This was a humiliation that could never be erased, but now his battle prowess was only at the middle stage of the 7th tier, while Ling Han was at the peak of the 7th tier. The only thing Golden Silk Moth was proud of was his physique, but Ling Han had caught up with him in that aspect as well. Was there still a chance for revenge? 7th tier should be able to look down on heaven and earth and be omnipotent. This kind of helpless begrudging made him extremely lost for words. Boom! Right at this moment, an even more powerful aura appeared, far surpassing any 7th tier. In fact, even all the 7th tiers added together couldn't compare. Hysteria had appeared. Without anyone to restrain it, it naturally had to take advantage of the opening to butt in. Sure, it threw out a tentacle, which whipped towards them. This was practically like a transcendent dimension slapping towards them. No, it was not like just a single transcendent dimension, but rather several of them. Chapter 3008, 3008 Weakness. Chapter 3008, 3008 Weakness. 3008 Weakness. When this attack came, Lin Luo and the others hurriedly parried. At the same time, Xin Chihu and the other 6th tiers broke into a run and fled. They didn't even have the courage to withstand a single strike. This wasn't because they lacked courage. Rather, it was because they would definitely die if they faced this attack head-on. Hysteria's strength had already surpassed the peak stage of the 7th tier, and could even be considered to have reached the 8th tier. Without cultivating an indestructible body, taking it head-on would definitely result in death. Yet Heavenly Venerate Shatter Mountains acted as if he had not seen anything, and was still attacking Ling Han madly. He knew that he would not be able to kill Ling Han, but the hope that he had been anticipating endlessly had suddenly shattered. How could he suppress the fury in his heart? In any case, he had an indestructible body, so what did it matter that he was willful? Moreover, since his hope had already been extinguished, how could he still have any intention of opposing Hysteria? What did it matter whether the Genesis world was destroyed or not? What did it have to do with him? Peng! Hysteria's attack landed, and all the 7th tiers were sent flying. No one could face it head-on. After swallowing the flaming frost realm, Hysteria's strength had reached the point that it could crush the combined power of all the 7th tiers. Pu. Ling Han couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. He couldn't help but feel shocked. The defense that he had cultivated was capable of withstanding several hundred attacks from a 7th tier, but with a single blow from Hysteria, it immediately shattered. The strength of Hysteria was unimaginable. Shatter Mountains' gaze swept over, and he couldn't help but reveal a cold smirk. So, it turns out that you are not truly immortal and indestructible. He had also suffered the attack of Hysteria, but had only been sent flying. His body itself was unwounded. But in Ling Han's case, his face had clearly turned pale, and he had even spat out blood. This was definitely not a genuine undying body. I understand now. Your defense is only super strong. As long as this limit is not broken, you will be able to endlessly replenish this defense, but if the power is overwhelming enough, this defense will not be able to withstand a single blow, Heavenly Venerate Shatter Mountains said. This was basically accurate. As expected of an ultimate elite of 7th tier. Since you're not immortal, just die. Heavenly Venerate Shatter Mountains charged over again, slashing with both hands, and condensing the 6 fundamental powers, which turned into indestructible sharp blades. Ling Han humphed, and brandished his fists in a furious counterattack. Boom. The two people exchanged blows. A powerful shockwave reverberated out, yet neither was wounded. Ling Han had already set up his defenses again. This kind of impact was naturally no big deal. Heavenly Venerate Shatter Mountains narrowed his eyes. Though he had seen through the weakness of Ling Han's defense, seeing through it was one matter, and being able to break through it was another. Truth be told, he couldn't break through it. However, Hysteria could. He immediately had an idea. When Hysteria delivered another attack, he would hold Ling Han back so that Ling Han would not have the chance to escape. Peng, under the crushing force, Heavenly Venerate Shatter Mountains was naturally sent flying, but not only was Ling Han sent flying, he was even throwing up blood continuously, looking quite terrible. Ha ha ha, brat, I'll take your life. Heavenly Venerate Shatter Mountains charged back, and the 6 fundamental powers turned into a battle spear that ruthlessly stabbed towards Ling Han. Ling Han frowned upon seeing this. He wasn't afraid of Shatter Mountains, but Hysteria was far too powerful, so much so that it could penetrate his defenses. Thus, he would be at a huge disadvantage if he started a battle here. He very much wanted to kill Chong Yang and his group, but to say nothing of the fact that his physique had not reached the true level of indestructibility, even if it had, he would not have been able to suppress Chong Yang and his group. Hence, if they continued to fight, it would be meaningless. He should leave. At present, his main priority was still to increase his cultivation level. As long as he advanced to the 6th tier, he would definitely be able to defeat Shatter Mountains and the other bastards, and if he advanced to the 7th tier, even if his power was not enough to kill these 5 people, it would be more than enough to suppress them. Once he had made up his mind, he turned around and left without hesitation. Shua, Hysteria, however, clearly planned to kill Ling Han here as well. A long tentacle flew over, bringing with it an incomparably terrifying might. Ling Han ran quickly, but Shatter Mountains charged towards him from the sidelines, brandishing his battle spear to stab at Ling Han. This couldn't hurt him, but it was enough to stop him, allowing Hysteria to wield the true executioner's blade. Fuck, so despicable. Ling Han thought. Shatter Mountains had actually joined forces with Hysteria to persecute him. He was truly shameless to the extreme. Shua, a figure appeared, blocking in front of Ling Han. Then, he moved, meeting Hysteria's attack. Lin Luo. Peng. Without any suspense, Lin Luo couldn't block this blow at all, and was immediately sent flying. However, with this block, the power of this blow finally decreased sharply, and when it hit Ling Han's body, the power had decreased several hundred times. Ling Han was sent flying, but this time he was completely unscathed. Others might not know, but Ling Han himself knew. The defense on his body had weakened by close to 90%. Which also meant that even if Hysteria's might was weakened a few hundred times, it still possessed the ability to threaten him. Senior Lin, Senior Ju, Senior Chu, I'll take my leave first. Ling Han said. However, he didn't slow down in the slightest, moving as quick as lightning. If he stayed here, he would be in great danger. Die. Heavenly Venerate Shatter Mountains also set out in a rapid pursuit, but was again blocked by Lin Luo. Chong Yang and the others were hot in pursuit, while Bai Fan, Xin Fu, and Heavenly Venerate Blood Rainbow joined forces to stop the 4 ultimate elites. All of them were undying and indestructible, and attacked without any reservations. As for 10,000 Shadows and Golden Silk Moth, to say nothing of Ju Heng and Chu Hao, even if they weren't there, would they dare to target Ling Han? Especially so for Golden Silk Moth. The shadow in his heart was as large as a mountain. 10,000 Shadows' first reaction upon seeing Ling Han was to turn around and run. With such a block, Ling Han naturally escaped. Sure, but the most terrifying was still Hysteria. When a tentacle waved out, it was more terrifying than anything else. Ling Han didn't take it head-on. Ling Han unleashed all of his power and pushed it to the extreme. He was running in front, while a long tentacle was pursuing him from behind. It was as if there was no limit to it, and it could stretch out endlessly, right until it reached him. The distance between the two was slowly narrowing. Whether in the void or a dimension, Hysteria's speed and power were number one in the world, and there was no other that could match it. Ling Han's expression did not change in the slightest. His expression was solemn, and he merely concentrated on running quickly. Ahead of them, the passageway to the realm battlefield had appeared. Once he entered it, he would be in the territory of the profound negative realm. It would have a massive suppression on Hysteria and greatly weaken its power. At that time, it would not be difficult for Ling Han to take another blow from Hysteria. When he was less than 5 kilometers away from that passage, Hysteria's attack reached him. Its tentacle surpassed him slightly, and then struck backward harshly. Not only did this strike possess frightening might, it was also going to send Ling Han into the realm battlefield. Obviously, Hysteria also knew that if Ling Han escaped into the profound negative realm, it would no longer be able to kill this young man. Ling Han did not enter into the void. That was the main battlefield of Hysteria. Before he could tear another rip into the void, he would definitely be entangled by Hysteria, right until his death. He roared loudly, and his figure shot up quickly. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,